Chapter 2382 A Person Hung on the Flagpole. Chapter 2382 A Person Hung on the Flagpole. Ling Han stopped, turned back round with a smile, and asked, "What is it? You want to spar with us?" How could the ancestor of the Nine Snake tribe dare? Hurriedly he smiled and said, Don't misunderstand. Luan Xing is one of our clan members, after all. She has just acknowledged her ancestors and returned to her clan, so it would be better that she stays for a few days longer in the clan. Whether it was Ling Han or the Empress, they were both unbelievably freakish. If they could stay in the ancestral grounds of the Nine Snake tribe, that would be equivalent to having gained a powerful backer. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. Old man, don't you think it's a little late to say this now? If the ancestor of the Nine Snake tribe had resolutely maintained his stand previously, Ling Han would not have let them go to so much trouble for nothing, either. But then what? He had not done anything, and had wanted to detach himself from the matter completely, yet now wanted to take advantage of them. How could there be such a good thing in this world? The ancestor of the Nine Snake tribe couldn't help but look embarrassed, yet he could say nothing to refute. He could only shake his head sheepishly. Ling Han and the Empress called the other women over, left the ancestral grounds of the Nine Snake tribe, and then headed towards Three Cloud City. Since they had already formed a grudge with the Kong clan, Ling Han would settle the matter once and for all. Furthermore, he was also very curious about how over 100 ascending origin tiers had emerged from the Kong clan all at once. This was very inconceivable. The ascending origin tier was actually already very awesome. It was the strongest beneath the Celestial King tier, and to have so many ascending origin tiers surge forth all at once without the support of a Celestial King was very illogical. Ling Han and his group did not travel very quickly. Roaming and traveling, they reached the Three Cloud City. Before even entering the city, they could see a flagpole that was stuck in front of the city gates, but there was no flag hanging from it. Instead, it was a person. This person's limbs were drooping, and they were twisted at an unusual angle at that. It seemed like it should be a corpse, but Ling Han could sense that there was actually a weak fluttering of divine sense from this person. This clearly was not a provoking action done by some opposing force of Three Cloud City, but rather a certain force in Three Cloud City exhibiting their power, and making an example. Thinking further, there was only one most powerful force in Three Cloud City, and that was the Kong clan. This person should have committed an offense against the Kong clan, and that was why he had been hung on this flagpole. Yet he had not been killed, but rather left to survive on his last breath. The purpose of this was to serve as a warning for others, that they should never become enemies with the Kong clan, or becoming this person would be their future. Ling Han was just about to take a step and continue onwards, but then suddenly stopped, and turned to look at that flagpole again. He sensed that there was something familiar about this person. It was not appearance, but rather divine sense. Who could it be? What is it? The Empress asked. Ling Han was still looking at the person hanging from the flagpole, and asked, Don't you guys think that we seem to have met this person before? The Empress studied him carefully, and then shook her head. With her incredibly proud personality, how could she possibly bother to remember people she had met? Understanding suddenly flashed in Ling Han's head, and he exclaimed, I remember now! When his words fell, he immediately waved a hand. A powerful gust of air swept out, and the ropes that were tied around that person split apart. Instantly, that person fell towards the ground. Ling Han stretched his hand again, picked the person up, and then laid him evenly on the ground. How dare you! There were guards at the city entrance, and when they saw how Ling Han actually dared to rescue him, they were instantly enraged. They all rushed over. There were only 8 of them at the city entrance, but with a series of shouts, another team of guards rushed out. There were more than 30 of them now. Ling Han ignored them, and instead placed a palm on the shoulder of that person. As regulations of wood activated, filled with vitality, that man's injuries were being healed. He frowned slightly. The Kong clan were really ruthless in their actions. They had first caged this person's power, and then planted some kind of secret technique which was devouring this person's vitality, causing incredible agony for him. Yet this person could not die in the short term, and it would last at least tens of thousands of years. What grudge or enmity was there between them that they had to go to such cruel lengths? "I was talking to you," a guard shouted. Brandishing the spear in his hands, he stabbed it towards Ling Han's shoulder. Hu Niu abruptly roared, which turned into a deafening dragon's roar. Pa! The spear in the hands of that guard was instantly shattered. Even the space between his thumb and forefinger split apart. Releasing a pained cry, he slid back continuously. The guards immediately looked like they were facing a powerful enemy as they all raised their weapons, aiming straight at Hu Niu. Hu Niu naturally would not be concerned. Instead, she giggled and said, "Whichever of you are feeling an itch, Niu will come to deal with you." Ling Han stimulated the regulations of wood, helping the wounded man heal. He had previously possessed the source powers of heaven and earth. Though he had given them up of his own volition, they had still left a brand behind on him. This naturally was extremely powerful, and the secret technique in that person's body was also being erased bit by bit. Because he could not injure this person, Ling Han progressed at a very slow speed. Fortunately, he stimulated the regulations of time, and time acceleration effects immediately took place. In only over a dozen minutes, the secret technique in that person's body was already unraveled, and with the nurturing and revitalizing effects of the regulations of wood, the person also recovered considerably. His eyelids trembled slightly, and then snapped open. "Fuck, indeed never anything good happens when I see you, brat," the person said. Ling Han laughed loudly. "I have saved your life, and you're not even going to say thanks?" This person was the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. In the past, he had set out on his own the moment they had entered into the celestial realm. He had not anticipated that they would reunite at this time and place, and that he would be so badly off to the point of almost dying. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire forcibly sat up, and looking at the surroundings, he couldn't help but frown. "Not good. This is still Three Cloud City. Let's go. Once the Kong clan rushes out, we will be in big trouble." "It's fine. If we are really caught up with by your enemies, I will hand you over to them. In any case, it has nothing to do with me," Ling Han joked. "Humph, it is already too late for you to know fear now." A cold laugh rang out, and a young man was seen walking out of the city. He was dressed in rich robes, and actually even held a folded paper fan in his hand. He was waving the fan with every step, very much a show-off. Ling Han ignored him, and asked, "So you have a grudge with the Kong clan? Great, I too want to seek them out, so we'll clear your debt as well while I'm at it." "No!" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire hurriedly shook his head. "Though your natural talent in cultivation is extraordinary, that is only limited to the ancient realm. Once we have entered into the celestial realm, there are many, many other more outstanding prodigies than you here. The Kong clan has over 100 ascending origin tiers, and you have only cultivated for several million years. How could you be a match for them? Even if it was he who was recultivating from the beginning, he had just advanced into the Immortal Palace tier now. The gap was astonishingly wide. Even he was this way, what more when it was Ling Han?" Ling Han put on an act of displeasure and demanded, "Are you looking down on me? Fuck, let's flee quickly. Anything else, we can talk later," the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire urged. He had no wish to hang on the flagpole again. "Want to flee?" The young man in embroidered robes smirked coldly. His nostrils were spurting flames in his fury. Not a single member of Ling Han and his group actually gave him any regard, and they were still openly and brazenly talking about fleeing. Did they think he was dead? "Anyone who becomes enemies with our Kong clan will never have long to live," he declared menacingly. "And who are you?" Ling Han asked. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire couldn't help but moan. There was such a wonderful chance for them to run, which Ling Han was not using, but was actually spending it on bickering. The young man in embroidered robes humphed, and declared, "I am Kong Xiang." He paused, swept a glance over Ling Han and his group, and then demanded proudly, "If you kneel down now and beg for mercy, I can consider sparing your lives." Ling Han laughed, turned his head, and commented, I discover that the members of the Kong clan really have a natural talent at jokes. The women also gave him face by laughing lightly. Kong Xiang was enraged. He drew a long spear, and suddenly rushed towards Ling Han rapidly. He delivered a sweeping strike with his spear, which exuded formidable might. Chapter 2383 Reason for the Calamity. Chapter 2383 Reason for the Calamity. In the younger generation of the Kong clan, Kong Xiang's natural talent was not too weak. Though he had only been cultivating for just over 100,000 years, he was shockingly already a fourth severance. This spear was extremely frightening. As the seals lit up one after another, it seemed capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas. Ling Han blew out a breath of air, and a gust of wind surged out. Kong Xiang's charge immediately came to an abrupt stop. His whole person seemed like he was in slow motion. He was taking steps with great difficulty, and the clothing that he was wearing was also torn to shreds by the terrifying force of the gust, instantly turning him naked. As the gust swept past, Kong Xiang suddenly stumbled, almost dropping onto the ground. When he discovered the embarrassing state he was in, he hurriedly moved to cover the spot between his legs, but when he realized that even if he had managed to cover the front, there was nothing covering his back, his grip on the spear couldn't help but loosen as he used the other hand to cover his behind. His face was completely flushed red, and he felt that Ling Han was really too immoral to actually use such an underhanded trick. He was too shameless. Ling Han laughed loudly. No need to cover it. It's not that much bigger than an ant, so there is no need to worry that it would be seen at all. Why you? Kong Xiang pointed his finger at Ling Han, but when he pointed, he realized that he was about to reveal himself again. Quickly, he withdrew his hand, his face bright red as he wanted nothing more than for there to be a hole in the ground where he could bury himself in. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire sighed, and said, Ling Han, this person is only a fourth severance, but the Kong clan has many elites, so run faster. Will you do it if I call you Big Brother? I am your big brother in the first place. Ling Han grinned. He clapped a hand on the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire's shoulder. Don't worry. Big Brother will protect you. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was depressed. I have already warned you. If you are captured, hung up, and beaten, don't say I didn't warn you. Didn't I say that I would hand you over if I was outmatched? Ling Han began to tease him again. Scram! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire rolled his eyes at him. Kong Xiang quickly took out clothing from his spatial god tool which he changed into, and breathed a sigh of relief. He picked up his spear again as he glared furiously at Ling Han. If eyes could kill, Ling Han should have died countless times over. He did not dare to make any further moves rashly. Though Ling Han had not revealed his strength previously, Kong Xiang had been forced to a stop with just a breath of air from the former, and it even tore his clothes to shreds. This strength was definitely superior to his, and it was not just by a little bit, either. It should be known that the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was an immortal palaceteer, so based on the fact that Ling Han could be friends with him, he, too, should be an immortal palaceteer as well. Losing at the hand of someone like this, there was no need for him to feel ashamed. As he sent out a signal for reinforcements, he kept his eyes on Ling Han, and demanded, Who are you? To dare trifle with our Kong clan, do you dare to announce your name? Ling Han smiled faintly. Originally, a minor character like you would not be worthy of talking to me, but who asked that I am not the type to put on any airs? My name is Ba. Ba? Kong Xiang mumbled as he searched through his knowledge to see if there was someone who matched that name. Yes, good son. Ling Han nodded. Fuck, he had been tricked. Kong Xiang glared at Ling Han furiously, and even his hair stood on ends. He felt that Ling Han was really too despicable. He was clearly an immortal palaceteer, yet had actually taken advantage of him, a mere fourth severance, repeatedly. How could he do that? Just how did you make enemies of the Kong clan? Ling Han paid no further regard to Kong Xiang. There was really no need for him to take such a minor character to heart. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was glum. Could you find a different time and place to ask this question, you curious brat? I've already told you that we need to flee. Why do you not listen at all? Remember how I was hunted, and forced to flee into the lower realm? He still explained, or he would feel uncomfortable. Ling Han gave in. Oh. It has something to do with the Kong clan. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire nodded. That was a matter of several 100 million years ago. I obtained a treasure map, yet the ancestor of the Kong clan got wind of it, and thus pursued me. Though I managed to fortunately escape with my life, the treasure map still fell into the hands of the ancestor of the Kong clan. This could be imagined. In the past, when the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire fled into the lower realm, he was only left with a sliver of divine sense. A great immortal palace tier elite actually needed the lower realm to help him gather materials to rebuild his body, which showed how miserable he had once been. The treasure map being snatched away was also within reason. Then the reason why you have come here was to take back your treasure map? Ling Han asked. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire shook his head. It's already been so many years, and the Kong clan must have taken out the treasure by now. Moreover, the Kong clan had previously just been an ordinary 4-star force, with only a single ascending origin tier, yet now there are as many as over 100 of them. He paused. This must be linked to that treasure trove. Ling Han agreed. If nothing unusual happened, how could an ordinary 4-star force possibly leap to the top tier with a single bound? A horse couldn't get fat without an extra ration, and a man couldn't get rich without an extra income. Furthermore, he was sure that the Kong clan would have obtained 1 to 2 celestial kings by now if it were not for the fact that it was required to walk the celestial path to become a celestial king. The treasure trove that they had obtained had really been useful. I am indeed dissatisfied, but I have not yet cultivated to the ascending origin tier, so I naturally could not have come to deliver myself to death. I merely wanted to observe the situation. However, I mistakenly befriended a vile character, and leaked the secret of my identity. In the end, the Kong clan captured me, and I suffered great torture. I have already been hung up there for over 10,000 years. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire sighed, feeling a coldness from being unable to bring himself to look back on his past. It had been 10,000 years, and merely being hung on the flagpole, exposed to the elements, and being mocked and ridiculed was not something a proud prodigy could bear, what more when restrictions had been placed on him as he was constantly enduring a great agony. Ling Han gave in. Oh. This Kong clan was truly cruel. They were truly the typical standard to kill others for the sake of treasure. But in the greater environment of the celestial realm, this kind of situation seemed to be commonplace, and most people would choose this course of action. Zhou. Another few figures appeared. The reinforcements from the Kong clan had arrived. This time, a few immortal palace tiers had arrived. Though they were strong, because Three Cloud City was really too big, the journey here would also require a long period of time. Even if they had gotten the news and set out immediately, it was only now that they finally reached their destination. 9th Elder! 11th Elder! 19th Elder! Kong Xiang quickly called out. As he saw so many elites come all at once, his confidence was immediately replenished. A middle-aged man's eyes swept over Ling Han's face as quick as lightning. It was like a bolt out of the blue, capable of causing blindness. He humphed heavily. Who are you, to actually dare interfere in the matters of our Kong clan? Can it be that I am just intervening because I can't bear the injustice? Ling Han smiled, and pointed at himself. A real man does not change his name. My name is Ba. Ba? This middle-aged man was also duped. He murmured this word, mulling over this name. Good son. Ling Han nodded. Only now did the middle-aged man realize that he had been tricked. He couldn't help but fly into a rage, his expression darkening quickly. You actually dare to play such tricks in front of me? How preposterous! No need to waste words on him. Let's just take him down directly, and hang them both at the city gates. Another middle-aged man said. He was short in build, but his aura was considerably astonishing. He was like a wild beast, and one would feel a chill rise up from the bottom of one's heart with just a look from him. All right. The first middle-aged man nodded. He stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han, and this turned into a giant black-colored hand. The mystical power of Immortal Palace-Tier blazed. This blow was extremely terrifying. He did not underestimate Ling Han, because based on Kong Xiang's report, Ling Han was definitely in the Immortal Palace-Tier. Chapter 2384 Recognized. Chapter 2384 Recognized. Ling Han smiled faintly before taking a small breath and exhaling. Raging wind instantly swept forth. However, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire shook his head upon seeing this. His opponent was Kong Lingqi, a third secret Immortal Palace-Tier elite from the Kong clan. How could he be regarded as someone on the same level as Kong Xiang? Even the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire would have to unleash his full power against him. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. Yet Ling Han was simply blowing some air? What was this? Celestial wind? Meanwhile, Kong Lingqi was also infuriated. This brat actually dared to attack him with a breath? Why didn't he spew some hot air to blow himself to death? You're seeking death! He roared with a humph. He rapidly pressed down with his large hand, yearning not to only suppress Ling Han, but also to subject him to immense torture. Otherwise, he couldn't quell his anger. Whoosh! The wind howled, and a devastating power swept through the surroundings. Kong Lingqi's attack was utterly futile as it was immediately crushed into pieces, scattering with the wind. However, the wind didn't stop, and it continued to howl toward Kong Lingqi, causing him to sway. Thud, thud, thud. He retreated several steps, with his clothes all torn to shreds. He looked much like a fluttering butterfly. When the wind dispersed, it was clear that Kong Lingqi had suffered the same fate as Kong Lingqi was but naked. Tisk! Ling Han couldn't help but feel astonished. This was because Kong Lingqi was also smooth and bare down there. This wasn't an innate condition, but rather a result of external action. Fuck, he truly knows how to toy with them. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and the remaining members of the Kong clan were all stupefied. With a single breath, Ling Han had actually repelled the attack of a third secret elite. Not only that, but he had even shredded his clothes. Just what kind of astounding power was this? Ascending Origin Tier! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed with a gulp. He was filled with shock and disbelief. Ling Han had actually ascended to the Ascending Origin Tier? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was still only at the Immortal Palace Tier. One had to realize that he was recultivating, so his cultivation speed should have been hundreds or even thousands of times quicker than Ling Han's, yet he was actually surpassed? No wonder Ling Han was brimming with confidence. As an Ascending Origin Tier elite facing off against a fellow Ascending Origin Tier elite, even if he were much weaker, he could still come and go as he pleased as long as he wasn't encircled. He could do as he pleased. He's only at the Immortal Palace Tier, so how in the world is he so powerful? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was in a bad state right now, so it was understandable that his judgment would be off. However, the members of the Kong clan were fine, so their judgment naturally wouldn't be affected. They were all beside themselves with shock. Ling Han was clearly exuding the aura of an Immortal Palace Tier elite. They hurriedly sent another signal, asking for more reinforcements. Ling Clan smiled and said, "Since you're all calling me father, why don't you come over and pay your respects?" He plucked the members of the Kong clan up as if he were an eagle plucking at small chicks. He then forced them to kneel in a row before the city gates. At the end of the day, he was acquainted with the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, while he only harbored disgust and contempt toward the Kong clan. Thus, since he was free anyway, he decided to vent some anger for the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. "You're still only at the Immortal Palace Tier?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed in astonishment. Ling Han pondered for a moment before replying. "It's hard for me to answer with a direct yes or no." The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire rolled his eyes upon hearing this. He either was at the Immortal Palace Tier, or he wasn't. How was this hard to answer? Ling Han continued. After all, you're not aware of the existence of the foreign realm. What if I told you I reached the ascending origin tier there? However, after returning, I was suppressed back to the second secret. Right now, I've recultivated back to the 11th secret. Do you understand? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire chuckled in reply. Reaching the ascending origin tier in some foreign realm? What foreign realm? Moreover, what the hell is the 11th secret? Do you take me for a fool? Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Those who had ascended from the lower realm were now extremely far apart not only in terms of cultivation, but also in terms of knowledge. Not mentioning himself, the Rain Emperor had also advanced to the ascending origin tier and become a monarch star. Hu Niu was no different. However, people like Feng Piyun, Mu Rongqing, and the others had only reached the dividing soul tier at the highest. Meanwhile, even with a lifetime of experience, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had only recultivated to the Immortal Palace tier. Moreover, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was clearly unaware of the existence of monarch tiers and monarch stars. He was more so unaware of the battle between dimensions. However, after dropping that huge bomb in the two-realm battlefield, Ling Han was confident that the entire celestial realm would soon learn of the true faces of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and the two other Heavenly Venerates. They would also learn about the invasion being carried out by the foreign realm. Creating an illusion of peace was of no benefit to the future of the celestial realm. Moreover, the foreign realm was also trying to shake the foundations of the celestial realm by spreading their practice of praying to deities. It was necessary to alert the entire celestial realm to guard against this. Let me fill you in, Ling Han said with a smile. He then started to tell the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire about the battle between dimensions. While explaining this, he also mentioned the existence of monarch tiers and monarch stars. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire felt as if he were dreaming. In fact, even the members of the Kong clan didn't dare to believe this. The world they lived in was actually this dangerous? They were at risk of being invaded by another realm at any moment? They were at risk of being completely massacred? When Ling Han finished speaking, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was completely and utterly stupefied. He was rendered absolutely speechless. The members of the Kong clan didn't fare any better. Right now, their only thought was that Ling Han had definitely gone mad. It was also at this moment that the reinforcements from the Kong clan arrived. Humph! Who dares to challenge the might of the Kong clan? A large group of people marched over, with the leader wearing an expression of incandescent fury. This person had actually forced the members of the Kong clan to kneel in a row? How humiliating! Many people arrived this time, and their cultivation levels also varied greatly. Some were at the ascending origin tier, some were at the Immortal Palace tier, and some were even at the Dividing Soul tier or Severing Mundane tier. However, only 4 of them were at the Ascending Origin tier. Ling Han. Someone suddenly stammered in a shaky voice. Ling Han looked over before grinning, and saying, I remember you. You're Kong Yi, correct? He was one of the 3 Ascending Origin tier elites from the Kong clan who had gone to Nine Snake Island at that time. However, to his shock, not only had Ling Han not fled, but he had even charged into 3 Cloud City. Not good! Kong Yi exclaimed in his mind. This was because a large majority of elites from the Kong clan had been dispatched to Nine Snake Island to hunt Ling Han. However, this brat defied their expectations, and he had actually come straight to 3 Cloud City. Was he seizing this opportunity to destroy the Kong clan? Ling Han? Ling Han. Ling Han. Some of them wore blank expressions. Who in the world was Ling Han? However, the color drained from the faces of those in positions of power at the Kong clan. He was an unfathomably terrifying person. With a single punch, he had easily obliterated the arm of Kongan, forcing the 3 elites from the Kong clan to flee from Nine Snake Island in disarray. They had been utterly humiliated. Now, this Death Star was actually in 3 Cloud City. What do you want? Kong Yi yelled in a fierce voice. Yet, it was clear that his heart was gripped with fear. Ling Han was like an insurmountable beast. Ling Han patted the shoulder of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and said, "He's my underling, yet he was tied up and brutally beaten by you people. Now, I've naturally come to avenge him." The members of the Kong clan all felt extremely vexed. When going to Nine Snake Island, it had turned out to be an ancestral ground of Ling Han's wife. When punishing an opponent of the Kong clan, it turned out that he was actually Ling Han's underling. Was the Kong clan destined to clash with this person? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire felt even more vexed. "I'm not your underling." At that time, when Ling Han had begged him to teach him some mystical powers, he had put on all the airs he could, yet he had become an underling now. Ling Han roared with laughter and said, "Many people beg to become my underling, yet there's not a chance in hell that they can. If you hadn't been a good friend of mine, I wouldn't have opened such a back door for you either." He glanced at the members of the Kong clan, and said, "Come on, let's pay a visit to your clan. I want to see what kind of dangerous place it is." "Ling Han, don't push your luck!" Kong Yi roared. However, they only had 4 ascending origin tier elites present, and there were only 5 more back at the clan quarters. Could the 9 of them stop Ling Han? He didn't have a shred of confidence. "Obediently lead the way," Ling Han said with force. Chapter 2385 The Kong Clan is no more. Chapter 2385 The Kong Clan is no more. Just how powerful was Ling Han now? When he unleashed his body art, he could reach a vitality index of over 4,400. This was thanks to the might of the Heavenly Venerate blood from Heavenly Venerate Wulu. However, this blood hadn't unleashed its might all at once, and it would gradually allow Ling Han to become more powerful. Even though Heavenly Venerate Wulu had already removed the murderous aura from the blood, if it unleashed all of its might at once, Ling Han would definitely still be killed several times over. If this blood were bestowed upon anyone else, even though they would also receive huge benefits, it would still be incomparable to what Ling Han had received. This was because only Ling Han could draw on the power of heaven and earth to temper his body. These two notions were aligned. If one couldn't draw on the power of heaven and earth, they would also fail to fully utilize the potential of heavenly venerable blood. Right now, Ling Han was far too ferocious. With a few strikes, he easily defeated the 4 ascending origin tier elites from the Kong clan. Of course, this was easier due to the fact that only Kong Yi had reached the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. The other 3 were either at the small accomplishment or the great accomplishment. The gulf between them was far too great. After being suppressed by Ling Han, the members of the Kong clan had no option but to lead this wolf into their house. Upon arriving, the remaining 5 ascending origin tier elites also charged forward to attack them. However, they couldn't even defeat the Empress and Hu Niu before being suppressed. And thereupon, Ling Han occupied their clan headquarters. Right now, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was living the high life, recuperating in the Kong clan with 3 ascending origin tier elites serving him. If he were slightly unhappy, he would chide them with no reservations. After suffering for over 10,000 years, he was naturally pent up with rage. However, he was even more worried about the treasure map that the Kong clan had obtained at that time. Just what kind of treasure had they found? It had actually allowed them to flourish to this stage. Ling Han was also filled with curiosity. He dragged the ascending origin tier elites over, and interrogated them again and again. This was evidently a big secret of the Kong clan. Thus, the ascending origin tier elites at the small accomplishment and great accomplishment were indeed unaware of it. They were completely dumbfounded no matter what Ling Han asked them. Only Kong Yi acted secretively and suspiciously. Ling Han couldn't be bothered plucking his soul, so he handed this task to Bewitching Maiden Ro. She was a master of controlling others. With Bewitching Maiden Ro's cultivation, she shouldn't have been capable of affecting an ascending origin tier elite at the consummate level. However, Kong Ye's cultivation had been sealed by Ling Han, so he couldn't resist her ability at all. With a few simple questions, he quickly revealed all that he knew. Following the treasure map, the Kong clan had managed to uncover an astonishing treasure trove. They had obtained an enormous number of alchemical pills, and it was these alchemical pills that had helped them soar in leaps and bounds in these past several billion years. In such a short span of time, they had gained hundreds more ascending origin tier elites. However, this treasure chamber still contained many seals that had yet to be undone. Thus, the Kong clan had only obtained a portion of the treasures. Because of its importance, even Kong Yi didn't know where this treasure chamber was located. This secret was buried deep in the heart of the ancestor of the Kong clan. The treasure storage of an ancient celestial king? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire asked in excitement. However, Ling Han said, with so many alchemical pills, enough to help hundreds of people advance to the ascending origin tier, I suspect that this isn't the treasure storage of a celestial king. Instead, it's probably the treasure storage of a 5-star alchemist. His heart thumped in excitement. He was only a step away from becoming a 5-star alchemist. If he were able to interact with some 5-star alchemical pills, perhaps this door would be pushed open, allowing him to take the final and most critical step. 5-star alchemist! An expression of respect and reverence involuntarily spread across the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire's face. It was arguable that becoming a 5-star alchemist was even more difficult than becoming a celestial king. Even though there were few celestial kings in the world, it wasn't that they were extremely rare, either. However, 5-star alchemists were as rare as could be. Such was their status that even lower-level celestial kings would have to pay their respects to them. Higher-level celestial kings would also need to treat them with respect. Ling Han shook his head, lightly punching him in the shoulder, and saying, "There's nothing special about 5-star alchemists. In the near future, your older brother will also become such an existence." Ha ha! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire naturally didn't believe this. Being talented in cultivation and being talented in alchemy were two completely different things. Ling Han didn't explain himself. In any case, there would come a day when his underling would become transfixed with shock. After waiting for just 2 days, the army of the Kong clan finally came charging back. "Get the fuck out here!" An old man with white eyebrows and white hair bellowed. He was tall and sturdy, and he was dressed in a red robe. He was none other than the clan leader of the Kong clan. At the same time, he was also the first ascending origin tier elite of the Kong clan. He was the one who had obtained the treasure map. Upon arriving back at the clan, he was immediately flooded with wails of grief and vexation. This was naturally because the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had been far too wanton about taking his anger out on them. The past 2 days had been agonizing torture for the members of the Kong clan. It had only ever been them enslaving others. How could they possibly accept the opposite? Crack! Lightning shook heaven and earth as dark clouds formed above the Kong clan. This was heavenly tribulation. The members of the Kong clan were all given a fright. Heavenly tribulation was indiscriminate, and its rage could easily reduce the entire Kong clan to rubble. Whoosh! A figure soared into the sky. It was none other than the Empress. She had accumulated enough experience, so she resolutely unleashed her cultivation to invite heavenly tribulation. She cared nothing about others, so she naturally didn't give a toss about whose home this was. In any case, it would be fine as long as it wasn't her own home. Thus, she decided to face her tribulation here. Crack! 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 Deafening thunder rumbled as arcs of vicious lightning blasted toward the Empress. The Empress was an extraordinary being. She was an 11th secret monarch star, and she had even cultivated some source power. Thus, in the eyes of heaven and earth, she was an anomaly that couldn't be tolerated. As such, this heavenly tribulation was as terrifying as could be, its power far surpassing what ordinary cultivators at the small accomplishment of the ascending origin tier would face. This greatly alarmed the members of the Kong clan. They thought this was an elite advancing from the small accomplishment to the great accomplishment. Moreover, even though heavenly tribulation wouldn't strike innocent people, it would be indiscriminate toward buildings and other inanimate objects. After just 2 or 3 strikes of lightning, the Kong clan was already reduced to ruins. Ah! The elites of the Kong clan all roared in fury. However, they were completely powerless to stop this. Would they dare to charge into heavenly tribulation to drag the Empress away? If they dared to interfere with heavenly tribulation, they would be ruthlessly targeted by heaven and earth. Apart from freaks like Ling Han, who dared to face heavenly tribulation for fun, all they could do was bellow in rage, swearing to themselves that they would definitely crush Ling Han and the others to death. After half a day, the dark clouds finally dissipated, signaling the conclusion of heavenly tribulation. The heaven and earth of the celestial realm wasn't as powerful as the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, so its heavenly tribulation would also last for a much shorter time. Just as the members of the Kong clan were about to unleash their fury, dark clouds formed above their heads again, signaling the arrival of a new heavenly tribulation. Fuck! What's going on? They're lining up to face tribulations? Nyo is also going to play! Hu Nyo shouted in excitement. She dashed into the sky, beginning to face her tribulation. The members of the Kong clan all wore ashen expressions. Even though their headquarters had been destroyed by the Empress tribulation, there had still been a possibility that they could have rebuilt it. However, with Hu Nyo's tribulation lashing down, the flattened earth was further transformed into an expanse of uneven craters. However, this was only the beginning. Judging by the size of the tribulation, it was as if it wanted to transform the ancestral grounds of the Kong clan into a vast sea. Sure enough, after half a day, the ancestral grounds of the Kong clan vanished once and for all. What replaced it was a gigantic lake that was almost as large as a sea. They're finished, right? The members of the Kong clan were already seething with rage. Just as they were about to unleash this rage. Crack! There was the rumble of thunder as another tribulation formed overhead. Are you people done yet? This time, it was bewitching Maiden Ro. She had also recultivated to the ascending origin tier. She soared into the sky to face her tribulation. Very well. After half a day, the gigantic lake truly transformed into a sea. You utterly disgusting trash! The ancestor of the Kong clan roared as he glared at Ling Han and the others. When Ling Han's 3 wives had been facing their tribulations, he had drawn the others into his spatial god tool. Meanwhile, he had dealt with the shock waves of the tribulation by himself. This was nothing for him. The ancestor of the Kong clan could barely control his rage. He was going to kill them all. No, he was going to fucking eat them alive. Chapter 2386 Lion in a Flock of Sheep. Chapter 2386 Lion in a Flock of Sheep. The ancestor of the Kong clan immediately charged over, with columns of angry white air shooting from his nose. His eyes were ablaze, and it was clear that he had reached the epitome of fury. This was an indescribable fury. It was a fury that made him want to eat them alive. He summoned a black sword, and viciously slashed down at Ling Han. Following this slash, the symbols on the sword also lit up one after another, causing it to be enveloped in black mist that eventually transformed into countless skulls. The sword had yet to reach its target, yet a cacophony of piercing screams had already infiltrated Ling Han's mind. This wasn't some ordinary sound, but it was instead a divine sense attack. Ling Han humped softly, and roared, "Begone! Pa!" The countless skulls instantly shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, the screams in his mind also vanished into nothingness. The ancestor of the Kong clan became as pale as a sheet. He was already aware of Ling Han's insane power, but before witnessing it in person, he had been completely unable to imagine it. How is he so powerful? Attack him together! He commanded. He didn't try to save face, and he instead called for reinforcements. All of the ascending origin tier elites from the Kong clan instantly charged forward. They were 100 strong, and they immediately encircled Ling Han. The Empress and Hu Nyo didn't interfere. They had full confidence in Ling Han. However, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was filled with anxiety. This was 100 or so ascending origin tier elites. Moreover, over half of them had reached or were about to reach the pinnacle of the consummate level. Regardless of how powerful Ling Han was, he was only a lone immortal palace tier elite. Could he truly rival them? Charge! The ancestor of the Kong clan commanded. He took the lead as they all charged at Ling Han. The elites of the Kong clan all attacked in unison, instantly flooding the surroundings with blinding light and furious energy. Further drawing on the power of regulations, and the might that they unleashed was utterly terrifying to witness. Ling Han roared with laughter as he unleashed his fists of fury. Like a lion entering a flock of sheep, he actively charged into the large group of enemies. Pun pun pun! Just how freakish was his body art now? With each punch, a member of the Kong clan would be sent flying. They were simply no match for him. After a dozen or so punches, a dozen or so elites from the Kong clan were left with bloody and severe wounds. In fact, even their bones had been snapped and left sticking out of their skin. This was a harrowing sight. They were all rendered numb with fear. Just what kind of unfathomable battle prowess was this? Even though the ones who had been sent flying were only at the small accomplishment and great accomplishment, those at the consummate level would also stumble back and retreat when struck by Ling Han's powerful punches. The gulf between them and Ling Han was as clear as day. "Don't battle with him head on," the ancestor of the Kong clan warned. Their opponent was far too destructive, so fighting with him head on would only lead to injury and misfortune. The elites of the Kong clan immediately dispersed. Sure enough, they didn't dare to face Ling Han directly anymore. However, Ling Han unleashed the regulations of space, and transformed into hundreds of thousands of clones. Trying to evade his attacks wouldn't be so easy. Moreover, unleashing the power of his physique meant that he didn't need to draw on the power of regulations. Even though this would only save him a small amount of effort, it was enough for him to seize an absolute advantage. Pun pun pun! Wherever Ling Han passed, members of the Kong clan would be sent flying into the air. He was like a celestial maiden scattering flowers into the surroundings. Ling Han didn't show any mercy. He had briefly investigated the Kong clan these past 2 days, and they truly couldn't be classified as a peaceful and good clan. Instead, they were a typical example of a clan that had suddenly struck fortune. Relying on their large number of elites, they had harassed men and enslaved women, doing all evils that they could imagine. Thus, Ling Han didn't show any mercy at all. So be it if he killed these people. Moreover, what did it matter that the number of sheep was great? They were but food to fill the belly of the lion. In just a short moment, only 30 or so elites remained standing from the initial 100 or so. "All of you, stand back!" the ancestor of the Kong clan commanded in a solemn voice. They all exchanged glances. Perhaps their ancestor was going to lower his head to this youth. Otherwise, how could he rival Ling Han by himself? However, the ancestor of the Kong clan clearly had no intention to surrender. Instead, he summoned a sword. 1. This sword hovered out from his body, instantly unleashing a boundless green light. A paramount aura enveloped the surroundings, striking fear into everyone's heart. Wally transformed back into his original form as he dropped down from Ling Han's body. Green light shot from his eyes as he stared at the sword. "Celestial tool!" Ling Han exclaimed in surprise. The Kong clan had definitely discovered a gigantic treasure trove, one that even contained celestial tools. They were already wealthier than many celestial kings. In any case, it was clear that this was the first time that the ancestor of the Kong clan had summoned this sword. However, it was understandable that he had kept it a secret. After all, an ascending origin tier elite possessing a celestial tool was a clear recipe for attracting disaster. The members of the Kong clan all wore blank expressions, and it was as if they were completely unaware of what was happening. However, many of them had already fallen to their knees involuntarily. This was the might of a celestial king. This divine sword naturally wouldn't recognize the ancestor of the Kong clan as its owner. Thus, he was unable to unleash its full might. Even so, this was still a celestial tool, so how could ordinary people withstand its celestial king to might? "Now that you've seen the Green Song Divine Sword, you can die without any regrets," the ancestor of the Kong clan said with a cold chuckle. He charged forward with the sword. Swoosh! A burst of sword chi swept over, slicing space apart and even shattering the regulations. The Celestial King tier was equal in status to regulations. Thus, Even though the celestial tool couldn't unleash its full might, its destructive power was still far beyond anything that an ascending origin tier elite could rival. Ling Han dashed aside to dodge this attack. The sword chi being powerful was one matter. However, it was only being wielded by the ancestor of the Kong clan, someone at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. "You can pay off your debts with this sword," Wally said. After sweeping his green gaze over the sword, a satisfied expression spread across his face. If he wanted to evolve, he would need to consume source power from the Genesis world. Thus, he was extremely drawn to things like the divine demon sword. Ling Han chuckled and said, "All right, then go and get it yourself. I'm a support-style war soldier. Fighting isn't my strong suit," Wally replied in a serious voice. He didn't catch the teasing tone in Ling Han's voice at all. "You're still dreaming of fighting against a celestial tool?" the ancestor of the Kong clan said with a sneer. He slashed down with the green song divine sword again and again, unleashing torrents of petrifying sword intent. The entire space was torn into shreds. As a result, Ling Han was no longer able to draw on the surrounding power of regulations. They had all been obliterated by the divine sword. Glory to the ancestor! Upon seeing Ling Han being forced to dodge and flee, the members of the Kong clan were all filled with vigor and excitement. They shouted in delirium, and they felt as if they could finally breathe out their pent-up anger. "You actually dared to challenge the grand might of the Kong clan? You've truly grown tired of living. Cripple his cultivation and hang him before the city gates. Let him die a miserable and torturous death. No, no, no. His battle prowess is terrifying, so it's best that we kill him as soon as possible. We can't give him any chance to turn the tables." Upon hearing the mention of hanging someone at the city gates, the expression of the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire instantly turned dark. His mind naturally wandered back to the time when he had suffered this wretched fate. He gritted his teeth in anger. The ancestor of the Kong clan was filled with fighting spirit as he roared again and again. He swung the divine sword quicker and quicker, and it was clear that he wanted to kill Ling Han as quickly as possible. This young cultivator was far too terrifying. If he allowed him to develop any more, perhaps even a divine sword wouldn't be able to suppress him. "Brat, where has your arrogance disappeared?" the ancestor of the Kong clan said with a sneer. Even the 100 or so ascending origin tier elites of the Kong clan hadn't been able to suppress Ling Han, and they had instead been either killed or severely wounded by him. Now that the tables had turned, he naturally couldn't help but taunt and ridicule Ling Han. Ling Han grinned and said, "Old man, be careful of extreme joy begetting sorrow. You can only shoot your mouth off now." The ancestor of the Kong clan scoffed. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "Initially, I still wanted to satisfy your thirst for vainglory. However, since you're itching for a beating, fine, I'll satisfy you." Whoosh! Another burst of sword chi swept over. This was the paramount regulation itself, and it could sever all matter in the world. However, Ling Han was unafraid as he charged toward it. It was as if he were going to face the might of the divine sword head-on. The ancestor of the Kong clan was both astonished and delighted. He hadn't imagined that Ling Han would actually be so foolish. However, he naturally wasn't against this. He chuckled in his mind. This brat has truly lost his mind. Just because he's freakish, he thinks he can even rival the might of a divine sword? Pooh! However, the scene that followed caused his eyes to pop from their sockets. Chapter 2387 Trap. Chapter 2387 Trap. A burst of razor-sharp sword light also exploded from Ling Han's body, blocking the attack of the green song divine sword. He was completely unscathed. How could the ancestor of the Kong clan not be astounded? That was a divine sword. It was a sword that could slice through anything. Now, however, it had actually failed to kill Ling Han? How was this possible? Was this brat so freakish that he could even rival celestial kings? Ling Han charged over with divine demon sword in hand. It was none other than the divine demon sword that had blocked the sword chi of the green song divine sword. Otherwise, Even with a physique as freakish as his, there was no way that Ling Han would dare to face the attack of a celestial tool head-on. That would be no different from suicide. The ancestor of the Kong clan refused to accept this, and he continued to swing the green Song divine sword again and again. He attacked Ling Han in wild fury. Pun! 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 Ling Han brandished his divine demon sword to parry these attacks, blocking the bursts of deadly sword chi. Even though the divine demon sword wasn't a celestial tool yet, its material had already reached the level of divine metal. In any case, the green Song divine sword couldn't unleash the true might of celestial kings, so there was actually little difference in might between the two swords. Why, you also own a celestial tool? The ancestor of the Kong clan stammered in disbelief. He was truly flustered at this moment. The green Song divine sword was his ultimate trump card, yet Ling Han was actually able to rival it? How could he not be flustered? This was a celestial tool. Something that even celestial kings didn't necessarily possess. How could such a measly immortal palace tier elite obtain one? If he knew that Ling Han not only possessed a celestial tool, but that the divine demon sword even had the potential to become a heavenly venerate tool, perhaps he would pass out in fright. In fact, Ling Han already possessed a heavenly venerate tool. It was just that this heavenly venerate tool was severely wounded at this moment, meaning that he couldn't use it for a very long time. Ling Han charged over, brimming with might as he slashed down with his divine demon sword. Clang, clang, clang! His sword violently clashed with the green Song divine sword. If outsiders saw this, they would definitely be transfixed with shock. This was because two non-celestial king tier cultivators were actually wielding a celestial tool each. Many celestial kings would be utterly embarrassed and humiliated by this sight. Pun! After blocking 7 strikes, the ancestor of the Kong clan was finally unable to endure anymore. He started to vomit blood. He hurriedly retrieved some alchemical pills to ingest, and his aura started to recover in no time. In fact, it became even stronger than before. It was clear that these alchemical pills did more than just heal him. Beyond that, they could even elevate his battle prowess. However, could a person's battle prowess increase for no reason at all, especially at the ascending origin tier, where even advancing a slight amount was unfathomably difficult? Ling Han was now certain that the Kong clan had definitely uncovered the treasure storage of some grand alchemist. Otherwise, how could they possess so many alchemical pills? Moreover, these were all extremely high-level alchemical pills. In any case, under Ling Han's relentless attacks, it wasn't long before the ancestor of the Kong clan started to show signs of struggle again. This time, he couldn't ingest any more alchemical pills. It wasn't that he had run out of them, but rather that the effects of these alchemical pills were far too potent. They could not only heal someone, but they could even unleash someone's potential. However, it was also because of this that one couldn't ingest too many of these pills. Otherwise, they would die from an overdose. However, Ling Han was far too powerful, so the ancestor of the Kong clan could only block a few strikes before suffering severe wounds again. He felt like he was about to die. "Stop! Stop!" he shouted as he hurriedly shot back in retreat. He tried to distance himself from Ling Han, shouting, "Young man, there's no unresolvable animosity between us, so why don't we stop here? I'm willing to compensate your friend." After uttering these words, he couldn't help but feel humiliated and vexed. Their ancestral grounds had been flattened, and their elites had been wounded and killed. Yet, he actually had to apologize to the culprit behind all of this. How could he not feel vexed and angry? However, what else could he do? If he continued to fight, it was certain that he would end up dead. "All right," Ling Han said with a nod. "At that time, you snatched a treasure map from my underling. You can return that map now. Of course, you need to return it with all the treasures that you obtained as well." The ancestor of the Kong clan wore a livid expression. This treasure map was far too important. Even after several billion years, and even though he had already obtained so many treasures, he had only managed to clear out half of the treasure storage. Moreover, the most valuable treasures still remained inside. It wasn't that he didn't want to retrieve these treasures, but rather that he couldn't. He needed a profound amount of time to undo the seals in the treasure storage. Thus, how could he hand this treasure map over? It was the foundation for the Kong clan's rise. The ancestor of the Kong clan smiled and said, "To be honest with you, I've already cleared out the entire treasure storage. As for the treasure map, I naturally burned it a long time ago." Ling Han shook his head and said, "Old man, are you trying to trick a 3-year-old with these words? If you don't hand the treasure map over, you won't live to see another day. Old geezer!" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire also stepped forward. Since Ling Han had gained an upper hand, he was naturally unafraid to speak as well. "There's genuinely no treasure map to hand over," the ancestor of the Kong clan said in a sincere voice. "Then I'll retrieve it by myself," Ling Han said. He charged forward with vigor, slashing down with his divine demon sword. The ancestor of the Kong clan blocked a few strikes, yet he became increasingly unable to resist. After a while, Ling Han sent him sprawling with a punch before taking him captive. "Search his mind," the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. He bitterly hated the Kong clan, especially the ancestor of the Kong clan. If it weren't for this person, he would have definitely advanced to the ascending origin tier already. "No!" the ancestor of the Kong clan hurriedly shouted. He was filled with fear, and he continued, "I've already formed a seal in my mind. If someone tries to search it, it will immediately explode. You won't be able to find any secret." He was clearly afraid of death. After all, searching his mind was equivalent to killing him. Ling Han naturally wouldn't trust him so easily. He placed a hand on his head and sent a wisp of his divine sense inside. It wasn't long before he discovered that the ancestor of the Kong clan was indeed telling the truth. His mind was protected by seals that would self-destruct upon contact. "Don't even dream about trying to interrogate me either. Under the effects of these seals, it's impossible for me to reveal any information regarding the treasure map. Once I speak, my mind will crumble into pieces," the ancestor of the Kong clan said. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. He hadn't expected the ancestor of the Kong clan to be so ruthless to himself. "However, I can take you to that treasure chamber," the ancestor of the Kong clan said. With a quick turn, the ancestor of the Kong clan surprisingly made a concession. That treasure chamber was extremely dangerous. After several billion years, he had only managed to undo half of the restrictions there. Meanwhile, the remaining restrictions were even more terrifying. Trying to undo them would take a profound amount of time. At the very least, he was extremely familiar with this treasure chamber. As long as they entered together, he was confident that he could trick Ling Han and the others to their death. This was a trap. This was his key to transforming defeat into victory. Ling Clan gazed at the ancestor of the Kong clan. He was naturally aware of what this person was planning. However, he was unsure of just how dangerous this treasure chamber really was. However, would he falter in the face of danger? Ling Han smiled and said, "Fine. Then I'll be troubling you." "Ling Han!" the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire hurriedly exclaimed in warning. The attitude of this person had changed far too quickly. He was definitely scheming something sinister. "If you're too scared to go, then there'll be no treasures for you," Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Me? Too scared?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had a quick temper, so he immediately straightened his body and announced that he was going to go. However, he was no fool either. Since even the ancestor of the Kong clan could retrieve treasures from there, someone as powerful as Ling Han would naturally be fine as long as he was careful. Even so, they naturally couldn't be careless when entering such a dangerous place. Ling Han and the others made some preparations first before following the lead of the ancestor of the Kong clan to the treasure chamber. Only after setting off did the ancestor of the Kong clan reveal that the treasure chamber was located far away in the Seven Majestic Heaven. Chapter 2388 Advancing Physique. Chapter 2388 Advancing Physique. Ling Han was astonished as he glanced at the ancestor of the Kong clan. This old man was truly good at hiding things. The treasure chamber was in the 7 majestic heaven, yet he had situated the clan in the scorching flames heaven. There were a whopping 3 heavenly realms between these 2 places. Couldn't he have situated the clan somewhere closer? At least somewhere in the same heavenly realm? However, this was naturally an arrangement made in order to keep the secret. The sudden rise of the Kong clan had been far too unnatural. Anyone could see a problem. In fact, it was certain that members within the clan had also grown greedy and restless, yearning to take the treasure chamber for themselves. Thus, the ancestor of the Kong clan had decided to build the clan in the scorching flames heaven. That way, no one would ever suspect that the treasure chamber was located in the 7 majestic heaven. Otherwise, would it not be simpler to build the clan in the 7 majestic heaven? That way, it would definitely be easier to travel to and from the treasure chamber. Judging from this, it was clear that the ancestor of the Kong clan was a careful and meticulous person. It was also no wonder that he had placed seals in his own mind. However, it was also clear that this treasure chamber was definitely a profound place. It was because of this that the ancestor of the Kong clan was so unbelievably careful. Ling Han was completely unafraid. He was simply filled with eagerness and anticipation. It was genuinely possible that this was the treasure chamber of a 5-star alchemist. It was genuinely possible that he would find Celestial King Tier alchemical pills inside. In order to save time, Ling Han drew most of the people into his spatial god tool. Without the Black Tower, he felt that things were much more troublesome than before. After all, spatial god tools weren't exactly safe places to stay inside. They could be shattered very easily. It would be much better if he could forge them from divine metal. Ling Han turned his attention to the green Song divine sword. However, this was a divine sword. It was one matter that one couldn't unleash its full might if the sword didn't recognize them as its master. However, if he wanted to dissect or damage it, the sword would definitely unleash its might by itself. This was the grand power of a celestial king. Who dared to challenge it? At the very least, Ling Han wasn't keen to face it. However, Wally was extremely eager, and he wanted Ling Han to obtain the green Song divine sword for him. He said that Ling Han owed him this. You need 100 million years just to digest that one scroll, so giving it to you is definitely a waste. I'll look after it in the meantime. Rest assured, I definitely won't steal your things, Ling Han said in righteousness. Oh, that's right. Are you able to eliminate the Celestial King symbols on the sword? If these Celestial King symbols were destroyed, the celestial tool would be reduced to nothing more than a sharp weapon. It would only possess the innate might of divine metal, and it would be unable to unleash the power of celestial kings. In the eyes of others, this would be a humongous waste. It would be a case of neglecting the essentials to attend to the trifles. Why was a celestial tool freakish? It was exactly because of these celestial king symbols. Only divine metal could withstand such power, and all other materials would crumble under the magnificent power of celestial kings. Wally nodded and said, My body can automatically extract all fundamental matter. Can I learn this skill? Ling Han shamelessly asked. No, you can't, Wally replied with a shake of his head. My body is constructed from superstring materials, allowing me to possess an incredible recovery ability. Ling Han had indeed witnessed this ability before. He had managed to recover even after being smashed to pieces by the large black dog. Moreover, it was as if he hadn't experienced any wounds at all. Upon seeing this, the large black dog had thirsted for such an ability. However, it was a shame that it couldn't be taught. Ling Han shook his head. He might as well go and play with Little Terror. It was recultivating using the cultivation system of the celestial realm, and it had to be said that its progress was as slow as could be. This was naturally because it was formed by the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, meaning that it was born to fight for the foreign realm. Now that it had come to the celestial realm, it was naturally being targeted and suppressed to a great degree. If it weren't for Wally performing some surgery on Little Terror, changing some things and teaching it some other things, Little Terror would very likely have been immediately targeted and killed by heaven and earth upon entering the celestial realm. Ling Han accelerated time for Little Terror, allowing it to develop quicker and advance to the expected cultivation level quicker. No matter what, it at least needed to return to the ascending origin tier. Speaking of returning to the ascending origin tier, after traveling for 7 days, Ling Han also felt like he had accumulated enough experience and comprehension. He couldn't find a single flaw in his cultivation. Even Wally nodded in agreement. This was naturally thanks to the Heavenly Venerate blood. Otherwise, Ling Han might have needed to cultivate for dozens of years more before advancing. He unleashed his cultivation, and resolutely invited heavenly tribulation. Half a day passed, and Ling Han descended from the sky, unscathed. He got the others to obtain a carriage, and he sat inside to comprehend Tao. After his facing heavenly tribulation, a wealth of enlightenment had burst into his mind. This was mainly because the Heavenly Venerate blood had fused together with the indestructible Heaven's scroll. After reaching such a cultivation level, trying to advance his physique and divine sense with the indestructible Heaven's scroll no longer relied on cultivating in seclusion. Instead, it required a vast amount of natural treasures. However, even though Ling Han had obtained the resources of so many ancestral kings, he was still extremely tight on resources. After all, few ancestral kings would keep all of their belongings in their spatial god tool. In any case, during such intense battles, how could the spatial god tools of the ancestral kings have withstood the might of fellow ancestral kings or even heavenly venerates? Many of them had naturally been destroyed, with their contents disappearing into the void. Ling Han's physique was indeed advancing. However, it was doing so at a snail's pace. After facing heavenly tribulation, however, he had unexpectedly activated the Heavenly Venerate blood. This made him feel like his physique could advance to a new height. Just what kind of beings were Heavenly Venerates? These were beings who were transcendent above regulations. Just a single drop of their blood was unfathomably valuable, to say nothing of a handful. It was far more useful than any natural treasure. However, Heavenly Venerate Wula had been afraid of killing Ling Han, so he had slowed down the effects of the Heavenly Venerate blood. After being stimulated by heavenly tribulation, however, this blood had unleashed a small portion of its power. Ling Han was slowly enveloped by a thick cocoon. Its surface was golden yellow, and it more so shimmered with 18 different colors. It radiated with a paramount might. In the presence of such might, the others couldn't advance at all. They didn't dare to move this cocoon, so they could only pause their trip. Several days passed, and the golden cocoon finally cracked apart. Ling Han soared into the sky, his body completely naked. However, no one could see him clearly. This was because he was shrouded in colorful light that pulsated with an astonishing aura. Ah! My eyes! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed as he hurriedly turned around. Even though he couldn't see clearly, he was naturally aware of Ling Han's current state. He had actually seen the naked body of another man. He could barely contain his emotions. Pa! The Empress immediately smacked him to the floor. He actually dared to shun the body of her man? Was he tired of living? Being able to witness it was his fortune. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire could only hide his grief. He knew just how prideful the Empress was. Trying to reason with her would be completely futile. Thus, he had no option but to swallow his emotions. In any case, who told him to voice his feelings? Ling Han retrieved some clothes from his spatial god tool before descending to the ground. He was beaming from ear to ear. How do you feel? The Empress, Hun Yo, and bewitching maiden Ro asked as they gathered over. Meanwhile, his other wives all remained in the spatial god tool. They were all filled with eagerness. Ling Han had actually been shrouded in colorful light. This was a phenomenon unique to celestial kings. Ling Han shook his head and said, I'm still nowhere near the level of celestial king. The colorful light had appeared due to the Heavenly Venerate blood. You're not far off, Wally said. Green light scanned Ling Han up and down, and he continued. Right now your defense index has reached 4,800. Once it reaches 5,000, that will correspond to your so-called celestial king tier. This was absolutely terrifying. One had to realize that celestial kings could only gain such a powerful defense after channeling the power of regulations. However, Ling Han's physique alone had already reached such a state it was eternal. Comparing the two, it was easy to see just how freakish he was. Ling Han was also just learning of this. He only knew that his physique had advanced by a considerable amount, and that it was still unable to withstand the might of celestial tools head-on. However, he hadn't realized that the gap was already so small. Chapter 2389 Jiu Quan. Chapter 2389 Jiu Quan. The ancestor of the Kong clan was also listening in beside them, yet he couldn't make head nor tail of what was going on. What defense index? However, he at least understood that Ling Han's physique was incredibly freakish. It was almost at the Celestial King tier. Fortunately, it hadn't reached the Celestial King tier yet. Otherwise, the restrictions in the treasure chamber might not be able to wound him. Of course, it was also possible that these people were purposely lavishing praise onto Ling Han, with the intention of warning him not to have any dangerous thoughts. If that were the case, their attempts were in vain. They continued their journey. Ling Han and the Empress successfully unlocked a higher cultivation limit, so they could naturally start to cultivate source power again. This was truly a long process. Even with the blood essence of ancestral kings, they could only shorten this process by 10-fold to 100-fold, but it would still require a shocking amount of time. They didn't hide their tracks. In any case, it would have been extremely difficult to hide. This was because they needed to use numerous transfer formations, so the chance of being discovered was very high anyway. Thus, after traveling for around 2 months, their path was finally blocked by someone. It was an ordinary-looking young man. He was dressed in coarse clothes, and even though he was clearly young, he had a weathered and worn look. It was as if he had suffered far too much grief, causing his expression to become one of perpetual melancholy. He was obstructing Ling Han and the others' path, and he had even placed a large boulder in the middle of the road. He sat atop this boulder with his eyes half closed. However, this still couldn't hide his expression of melancholy. "I'll go!" the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire volunteered. He had already made a full recovery. Ling Han had refined some top-notch healing alchemical pills for him, and it was naturally very easy to heal the wounds of a measly immortal palace tier cultivator. Moreover, Ling Han was extremely generous to his friends, so he had even given the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire a significant amount of ancestral king blood. This greatly increased his cultivation speed, causing his battle prowess to also become much superior to what it had been before. Thus, he was itching to test himself out. Ling Han smiled and said, "You want to go? Perhaps even 10,000 of you won't be able to rival a single finger of this person." The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire naturally didn't believe this. "Brat, are you belittling me?" "He's speaking the truth," the young man on the boulder suddenly said. He opened his eyes, and they were surprisingly a haze of white. It was as if he were blind. However, possessing the ability to easily defeat the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, he was definitely an immortal palace tier elite at the very least. That being the case, how could he not heal his eyes? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was infuriated. So be it if Ling Han belittled him. He could treat this as banter between friends. However, who the fuck did this person think he was? Ling Han looked toward the youth and asked, "You are?" "Jiu Quan," the youth replied apathetically. "I possess everything, yet I always lack joy. I'm unable to attain perfection, so I'm called Jiu Quan 1. Hu Niu was extremely curious, and she asked, "Why not Jiu Mei 1? Jiu Quan glanced at Hu Niu and replied, "Because Jiu Mei is my junior sister 1. "Alrighty then. It's a pair of weirdos. Don't try to change the topic." "Am I really that weak?" the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire asked, unwilling to accept this. Jiu Quan stood up, and a devastating aura instantly surged forth. This was the unique aura of an ascending origin tier elite. His source power pulsated, easily resonating with the regulations of heaven and earth. This was because source power was the fundamental power of the world, so it was naturally closer to the regulations. Consummate level of the ascending origin tier, Ling Han said. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire immediately shut up. To say nothing of an ascending origin tier elite at the consummate level, even one at the small accomplishment could easily kill him 10,000 times over. I think we've met before? Ling Han said with a smile. No, we haven't, Jiu Quan replied with a shake of his head. So there's no animosity between us? Ling Han asked. No, Jiu Quan replied with another shake of his head. Then why are you blocking our path? Jiu Quan sighed and said, I can't go against Master's commands. Oh? Ling Han nodded and asked, Who's your master? Arduous Law Celestial King, Jiu Quan replied in a respectful voice. Never heard of him, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Then you've definitely heard of my Grand Master's esteemed name, Jiu Quan said. His eyes lit up, and it was as if an arc of raging lightning were shooting across the clear sky, forcing the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire to involuntarily squint. He's the Jiu Heavenly Venerate! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was astounded. He was naturally aware of the existence of Heavenly Venerates now. This Jiu Quan person was actually the grand disciple of a Heavenly Venerate? This was far too terrifying. He hurriedly opened his eyes, only to see Ling Han taking a step forward. His body leaned forward, and 2 gashes had already appeared on the sleeves on his forearm. These were clean cuts that had clearly been left by a sharp weapon. He then looked at Jiu Quan, only to see that a sword had appeared in his hand at some time. Right now, he was slowly sheathing this sword. With a crisp clang, the sword fully slid into its sheath. Whoosh! Ling Han's sleeves were completely severed, and they slowly drifted to the ground. However, there wasn't a single scratch on his arm. It was clear that in the split second that the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had closed his eyes, Ling Han had already exchanged a strike with Jiu Quan. In fact, they might have already exchanged several strikes. However, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire hadn't noticed these exchanges at all. If he hadn't opened his eyes to witness them, perhaps he would have thought that he had simply blinked and not missed anything at all. He drew a sharp breath. Just how powerful were these 2 people? Very well, you're worthy of being my opponent, Jiu Quan said apathetically. He possessed everything but the feeling of joy. He would never smile either. I'm at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, and you're at the small accomplishment. I'm only 2 minor levels above you. These were the words of Heavenly Venerate Wulu. They could target Ling Han as long as they were no more than 2 minor levels above him. Even the grand disciple of a Heavenly Venerate was being so careful, so it was clear that Heavenly Venerate Wulu had truly made a name for himself during that battle. He had also announced to the world that the Celestial Realm had a 4th Heavenly Venerate, one who was incredibly powerful and assertive. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and said, Then come, let's spar. The 2 of them soared into the sky. In no time, the sky was immediately filled with astonishing explosions. Deafening booms surged over, and it was as if the sky were rumbling with thunder. Everyone was gazing up at the sky. However, apart from Hunyo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro, the 3 ascending origin tier elites, no one else could see the battle clearly. The ancestor of the Kong clan couldn't see it clearly either. This was because his cultivation had been sealed. However, he silently prayed that Jiu Quan could kill Ling Han and his companions. That way, he could finally break free. Of course, he was also slightly worried. What if Jiu Quan chose the path of violence and killed him as well? However, it wasn't long before the explosions in the sky ceased. Peace and tranquility returned. Whoosh! A figure shot down. It was none other than Ling Han. He fled, Ling Han said. He squinted as he gazed into the distance. He had to admit that Jiu Quan was indeed a worthy opponent. He was extremely powerful. However, thanks to Ling Han's freakish physique, Jiu Quan could only be suppressed and pummeled. Thus, he naturally chose to flee. As the grand disciple of a Heavenly Venerate, he was indeed superior to most others. If Ling Han hadn't obtained the Heavenly Venerate blood and advanced his physique, the outcome of this battle would have been much harder to determine. After all, Jiu Quan possessed an advantage of 2 minor levels. By the looks of it, this won't be a peaceful trip, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Their location had already been exposed, so the elites from the 3 Heavenly Venerate lineages would definitely continue to hunt them. However, as long as he wasn't attacked by a celestial king, Ling Han was genuinely unafraid. They continued to advance. Sure enough, they were met with a wave after wave of attacks. Some came alone, while others came in groups. However, they were all beaten back by Ling Han. Some were even killed on the spot, serving as a warning to the others. Several months passed, and they had already entered the 7 majestic heaven. They had also traveled through the final transference portal. At this moment, they only had the final stretch left to travel. "Ha!" everyone exclaimed in astonishment. This was because 2 groups of people were engaged in a bloody battle before them. Moreover, the surroundings were already littered with corpses. Chapter 2390 Human Traffickers. Chapter 2390 Human Traffickers. When Ling Han and the others arrived, the battle was already drawing to a conclusion. One side only had 3 people remaining, while the other side was still strong in numbers. They had already gained an absolute advantage, so exterminating their opponents wouldn't take much longer. "This is the business of the Black Wind faction. If you know what's good for you, then piss off," a person from the more numerous side roared at Ling Han and the others. He wore a murderous expression. The situation seemed extremely clear. A group of mountain bandits was currently robbing another group, and Ling Han and the others had coincidentally come across their skirmish. However, was this truly a coincidence? During their journey, they had been hunted by far too many people. Even though they had all been beaten off, it was exactly because of this that they were even more cautious. Perhaps they had realized the futility of attacking them head-on, so they were trying out other tactics now. However, Ling Han was unafraid. He smiled and said, "What kind of business is this? Why don't we get rich together?" The members of the Black Wind faction all faltered upon hearing this. Were these people provoking them on purpose? Or were they truly this stupid? One of the bandits saw Hu Neo and the others, and he couldn't help but gulp in lust. "These 3 women are fairly fine. Go and test them out." 3 bandits instantly leaped forward, swinging their broadswords at Ling Han, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and the others. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was extremely pissed off. What in the world had he done? Why were these people randomly attacking him? Did he look like a pushover? He immediately charged forward. Pun pun pun! With a single punch from him, the 3 bandits were all sent flying, drawing a wonderful arc in the air before heavily thudding on the ground. Because these people were evil and merciless bandits, he hadn't held back at all. He had unleashed a fatal attack. They were only measly Genesis tier cultivators, and they hadn't even advanced to the severing mundane tier, yet they had actually dared to provoke him? His quick and brutal attack instantly terrified the remaining bandits. They screamed in fear as they fled in disarray. The 3 remaining survivors of the other group all breathed a sigh of relief. They then hurriedly thanked Ling Han and the others. "We still have urgent matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first. When we get to Red Fruit City, we'll make sure to thank you properly," one person said. Ling Han initially hadn't planned to play the part of a hero. He hadn't planned to ask for any thank you gift either. However, the words of this person displeased him greatly. This was far too perfunctory. No. This person hadn't given his name, nor had he given any specific location. That being the case, how would Ling Han and the others find them at Red Fruit City? He swept his gaze over them. These people were most likely merchants, and they had a total of 10 carriages of goods. When his gaze lingered over one of these carriages, tense expressions spread across the faces of the 3 people. "We're also tired after walking for so long, so we'll borrow one of your carriages to rest," Ling Han said with a smile. As he said this, he walked toward that carriage. "Good sir!" the 3 people exclaimed as they obstructed his path. "Come, please use this carriage. It's the largest and the most spacious, and its interior is also the most extravagant." Piss off! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said with a humph. With a flick of his hand, the three people instantly collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. Ling Han laughed, and he praised the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire by saying, "You're becoming better and better in your role as my underling." Piss off! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said with a ticked-off expression. When they arrived before that carriage, Ling Han reached over to open the carriage door, only to see 2 rows of women sitting inside. They were huddled together, and they all wore expressions of fear and terror. Looking closely, he could see that all of the women were bound by ropes. Ling Han instantly came to a realization. The bandits had indeed been genuine bandits. However, these merchants weren't some kind of upstanding citizens either. They were involved in human trafficking, so it was no wonder that they had been so anxious and tried to prevent him from entering this carriage. One of the 3 people suddenly unleashed a bellow as he lunged forward and swung his broadsword at Hun Yo. He knew they had been exposed, so he planned to take one of the women as a hostage. That way, he could use her to threaten Ling Han. Upon seeing this, the 2 other people also woke from their daze. They hurriedly raised their swords and charged forward. Hun Yo giggled before unleashing a deafening bellow. Boom! The weapons and clothes of the 3 people all exploded into smithereens. Their skin also cracked apart, causing blood to pour down their bodies. They started to stumble around, and it was as if they were drunk. Ling Han sent the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire over to free the bound women. Meanwhile, he jumped off the carriage with a smile and said, "You people are far too unprofessional when it comes to human trafficking. At the very least, you need to prepare a spatial god tool." The 3 people grumbled in their minds. If they could have afforded spatial god tools, they naturally wouldn't have taken such a big risk and gone to so much trouble. However, they were only at the Genesis tier, and they weren't familiar with the regulations of space either. Thus, they couldn't make their own spatial god tools. 2 birds of a feather. Ling Han resolutely lashed out. Pa! The 3 people exploded into clouds of blood. However, even though they had saved these people, they were now a burden on their group. After all, could they just abandon these frail women here? Neither Ling Han nor the others could find it in their heart to be so cruel. Thus, they had no option but to take these women home. Fortunately, the human traffickers had been low in cultivation level, so they didn't have the ability to kidnap people from too far away. As such, they managed to take them all home after just 2 days. Apart from one person. It was a small girl who was only 7 or 8 years old. She was wearing a green dress, and she was truly as adorable as could be. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been targeted by the human traffickers either. However, the problem was that she was actually mute. This complicated things greatly. The other kidnapped women hadn't known where this young girl had come from either. Ling Han and the others asked around in the surrounding villages, yet they couldn't find anyone who had lost a young daughter. After a while, they indeed found someone who claimed to have lost a daughter. However, Ling Han and the others discovered that this person harbored evil intentions, and was simply coveting the girl's beauty. In the end, Ling Han and the others had no option but to take her along with them. This young girl couldn't speak, so she was naturally quiet. However, her eyes were extremely lively, and at times, it even looked as if she possessed intelligence that could see through the mortal world. Ling Han and the others were quite astonished by this. Just what had this young girl experienced to possess such an expression? She was extremely peculiar, and she was always gazing into the distance. She wouldn't respond to any question either. Ling Han and the others all clicked their tongues in wonder. This young girl was truly as pure as a pond of water. Just how had she been raised to be so bright and pretty? This made Ling Han want to take her as a disciple. However, the young girl didn't respond to anyone, so he naturally couldn't take her in as a disciple even if he wanted to. They continued on their trip. Because they had already arrived in the 7 majestic heaven, it only took them 14 more days to arrive before the treasure chamber. Of course, they had encountered several more enemies these past few days. The final few hadn't challenged them head-on, and they had instead laid traps or attempted to assassinate them. It was as if they had finally realized that they couldn't defeat Ling Han head-on. However, none of this could trouble Ling Han. His physique had almost reached the Celestial King tier, so as long as he wasn't attacked by a Celestial King, only hacking him with a Celestial tool could deal any damage. Right now, apart from the ancestor of the Kong clan, he hadn't come across another Ascending Origin tier elite who possessed a Celestial tool. In this sense, the ancestor of the Kong clan was even more impressive than those disciples of the Heavenly Venerates. This was a lifeless and desolate mountain. There was nothing unique about it at all. However, none of them realized that after arriving here, the young girl Ling Han and the others called her Qing Qing One because she refused to change out of her green dress appeared as if she had regained her soul. The ancestor of the Kong clan fiddled left and right. After a long while, a passageway suddenly materialized at the foot of the desolate mountain. Ling Han didn't tell the ancestor of the Kong clan to lead the way. Instead, he grabbed him in his hand. That way, he could toss him forward to block any potential dangers that they encountered. Shortly after entering, the entrance behind them automatically resealed itself. The desolate mountain returned to its original form. Chapter 2391 Breaking the Restrictions. Chapter 2391 Breaking the Restrictions. The passageway was dark and eerie. However, following the sounds of their footsteps, the passageway started to light up section by section. Above them were pieces of jade-like rock. They could emit light, and quickly illuminated the entire passageway. The passageway wasn't long, and a large expanse of space opened up before them after a short while. They were standing in a cave atop a cliff. Before them was a stretch of buildings, situated around 3,000 meters below them. These buildings were exquisite, yet they also seemed dignified and majestic at the same time. They were all constructed from bricks and tiles, and the columns that stood among them were all engraved with dragons and phoenixes. The surrounding areas were filled with bamboo forests that gently swayed with the wind. "This is the treasure chamber," the ancestor of the Kong clan announced. "Let's go!" They flew down the cliff, yet they discovered that the expanse of buildings was protected by some kind of energy barrier. They couldn't enter this place directly. Ling Han could have attempted many different things. For example, he could have hacked at this barrier with his divine demon sword. He could have also asked Wally to analyze this barrier. There were many potential ways to destroy this barrier. However, since the ancestor of the Kong clan was here, why would he go to so much effort? "Come on, lead the way." The ancestor of the Kong clan led them before the expanse of buildings. After his fiddling with some unknown thing, they could then proceed into the area unhindered. "The buildings in front are all ordinary buildings. They're simply residences," the ancestor of the Kong clan said. "Only the 7 buildings in the back house treasures, so don't waste your time here." Even though he said this, how could they trust him so easily? They carefully searched all of the buildings. However, just as the ancestor of the Kong clan had said, these buildings were indeed devoid of treasures. After carefully searching all of the buildings, they finally arrived before the last 7 buildings. These buildings were clearly larger than the others. Moreover, the 7 buildings were laid out in an intriguing manner, with each of them seemingly conforming and resonating with the other. This was a 7 stars arrangement, where the central building was even larger and grander. It appeared much like an imperial chamber. "How do we enter?" Ling Han asked. "According to our agreement, I've already led you people here. Shouldn't you release me now?" the ancestor of the Kong clan replied. "Head, deciding things for yourself now, are we?" Ling Han patted the old man's shoulder. Who had agreed to this? The ancestor of the Kong clan naturally understood this as well. He started to bargain with them, saying, "Fine, if you want me to undo the restrictions, then unseal my cultivation first." Right now, he was no different from an ordinary person. "Sit aside first," Ling Han said. He naturally wouldn't concede any ground. He turned to Wally and asked, "Want some treasures? If you do, then undo the restrictions here." "You're taking advantage of me," Wally said in protest. He had surprisingly gained some intelligence. Ling Han laughed and said, "Suit yourself." If I undo the restrictions by myself, you don't need to think about getting any of the treasures. If you undo it, however, I can share some with you." After performing some calculations, Wally nodded in agreement. The women all shook their heads upon seeing this. In terms of calculation ability, Wally was truly as capable as could be. In terms of worldly wisdom, however, he was just as naive. If Ling Han undid the restrictions, the treasures would all belong to Ling Han. Then, if Wally undid the restrictions, shouldn't all of the treasures belong to him? Yet, he had actually agreed to Ling Han's proposal. In reality, everything was a trap. However, in Wally's eyes, it was extremely reasonable that he only received a portion of the treasures since there were so many people here. They were truly speechless about their husband. He would screw humans over, and he would even screw non-humans over. Wally walked forward. However, after taking a few steps, the floor suddenly lit up, unleashing a slash at him. This was a devastating attack that was at least at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. Whoosh! The blade of light slashed forth, yet Wally retreated even quicker. In some sense, he was also a cultivator of body arts. He didn't draw on the power of regulations, and he instead drew on the power of heaven and earth to unleash his might. As a result, his explosive power was even greater. The blade of light flashed past, yet it struck no target. Astonishment spread across the face of the ancestor of the Kong clan. The first time he had come here, he had been filled with excitement, yet he had also been lacking in power. Thus, he had suffered extremely grave wounds after being struck by this blade of light. However, it had also been because of this that he had recognized the importance of this treasure chamber. Now, however, Wally had actually dodged this attack with such ease. This instantly made him feel displeased. Wally continued to advance, and the blades of light also slashed forth one after another. However, they all failed to strike him. After a while, Wally came to a stop, not advancing any further. At the same time, light burst from his eyes, and it was very likely that he was performing some furious calculations. After a long while, he finally opened his eyes and said, "Follow me. Don't make any misstep." He took the lead, and everyone followed after him. The ancestor of the Kong clan was still hanging in Ling Han's grip. After taking a few steps, astonishment spread across the face of the ancestor of the Kong clan. This was because Wally had genuinely undone the restrictions of this building. He was unable to accept this. One had to realize that he had paid a huge price for discovering each step. He had suffered severe internal injuries, and it had taken him tens of thousands of years to recover each time. There had been many times that he had wanted to give up because this had been a truly torturous task. However, Wally hadn't been struck a single time. With just a few attempts, he had already undone the restrictions of this place. How could the ancestor of the Kong clan not feel frustrated and irritated? However, how could he know that Wally was actually the culmination of several hundred epochs of knowledge from a higher-level dimension? If he couldn't break the simple restriction of a celestial king, what right would the dark inverse realm have to invade the foreign realm? Wally led the way, and it wasn't long before they made it inside the building. After entering, what greeted them was row after row of shelves. There were all kinds of things on these shelves, with most of them being alchemical pills. However, many of the shelves were already empty. Their contents had clearly been taken by the ancestor of the Kong clan. "Hang on," Wally said. "There's a main control hub here, and if I close it, all of the restrictions here will disappear. However, this restriction also has the effect of maintaining the freshness of the items here. After closing it, the things here will slowly decay." Ling Han smiled and said, "That's fine." Wally went over to fiddle with the control hub. After a short while, he nodded and said, "It's done." Ling Han stepped forward, and sure enough, there wasn't any reaction at all. It was as if this were truly an ordinary building. The most shocked person was naturally the ancestor of the Kong clan. He had initially planned to bargain with his captors, first regaining his cultivation and then taking advantage of his familiarity with this place to trick them to lead them to their deaths. To his shock and disbelief, however, Wally's presence rendered the restrictions here completely useless. Qing also fluttered her eyelids as she glanced at Wally. It was as if she were curious. Ling Han and the others swept away all of the treasures. Most of the treasures had already been taken by the ancestor of the Kong clan, but there were still many things remaining. Most of the remaining treasures were alchemical pills, but there were also some other things such as precious jade that was extremely beneficial to cultivation. These treasures were all useless to Wally. Thus Ling Han wrote him another debt slip, promising to pay him back with divine metal and other similar items in the future. Only Wally would agree to such unfair exchanges. However, Wally didn't feel that this was unfair. He was extremely motivated as he undid the restrictions of the second building. Ling Han examined the alchemical pills. Sure enough, these were the works of a 5-star alchemist. Most of the alchemical pills had reached the 8th refinement, and a small number of them had even reached the 9th refinement. However, only a single alchemical pill had reached the 10th refinement. Chapter 2392, 7th level. Chapter 2392, 7th level. Ling Han carefully examined the 10th refinement alchemical pill, and expressions of understanding and realization would occasionally flash across his face. He had already reached the 9th refinement long ago. However, after such a long time, he was still unable to reach the 10th refinement. Thus, he was unable to become a 5-star alchemist. This was mainly because he had never seen a 10th refinement alchemical pill before. As such, he had needed to explore everything by himself. Now that there was a 10th refinement alchemical pill before him, he could naturally examine it and attain endless enlightenment. While Ling Han was busy examining the alchemical pill, Wally had already removed the restrictions of the second building. Just like the first building, this building was mostly filled with alchemical pills. However, a majority had already been taken by the ancestor of the Kong clan. Just like the first building, there were also few 10th refinement alchemical pills here. There were only a measly 2. However, they were both 4-star alchemical pills, and they weren't at the Celestial King tier. Ling Han only took the 10th refinement alchemical pills. They were extremely useful to him. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was giddy with excitement as he fervently ran around collecting the alchemical pills. However, his speed couldn't compare to that of Hun Yo and the others, so he could only shout, "Leave some for me! Leave some for me!" At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If it weren't for that bastard, I would have already become a celestial king! There were countless alchemical pills here, and his cultivation aptitude wasn't poor either. Thus, it was extremely likely that he could have indeed become a celestial king. However, Ling Han retorted, "The celestial path only opens once every 10 billion years. Even if you had obtained this treasure chamber, you'd still only have been toiling along at the ascending origin tier. Will it kill you not to taunt me?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire asked in irritation. Why did this brat enjoy taunting him so much? Was it just because he toyed with him when passing down his mystical powers at that time? Ling Han responded with a hearty laugh. Meanwhile, the ancestor of the Kong clan was on the verge of mental collapse. He had spent billions of years to empty half of this building. Now, however, Ling Han and the others had easily removed the restrictions. By the looks of it, they were truly going to empty this building in just a single day. This stark contrast truly drove him crazy. A cold chill enveloped his body. This was because he had already become useless. There was nothing he could use to bargain. If Ling Han and the others wanted to kill him, they would no longer need to hesitate. Sure enough, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire looked over. He was naturally the one who hated the ancestor of the Kong clan the most. Not only had this person snatched his opportunity, but he had even pushed him to the verge of death. We can calmly discuss things. I can return all of the alchemical pills and treasures that I took, the ancestor of the Kong clan said with a hurried chuckle. He didn't want to die at all. I don't need them, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said word by word. He reached over and made a slapping motion. Pa! The ancestor of the Kong clan was instantly flattened into a bloody pancake. Wally was definitely like a hard-working ox. He was plowing the field with no complaints at all. Before long, he had already removed the restrictions from 6 of the buildings. However, he stopped when he arrived at the 7th and final building. "This is an absolute restriction. It can only be removed by brute strength," he said. Ling Han and the others were collecting treasures slower than he was removing the restrictions. Thus, they didn't pay any attention to this. Instead, they all headed to the 3rd building. Just like the first 2 buildings, this building also mainly consisted of alchemical pills. When they arrived at the 4th building, they finally discovered some precious tools. There were all kinds of precious tools, though the large majority of them had already been taken. However, there wasn't any celestial tool. They truly wondered what kind of grand fortune the ancestor of the Kong clan had struck to obtain the Green Song Divine Sword. The 5th building was much like the 4th building. However, after arriving at the 6th building, they finally discovered divine metal. This was a fist-sized hunk of purple metal. It was shimmering with color, and it looked as attractive as could be. "Purple Sun Heavenly Celestial Metal!" Ling Han exclaimed. "Divine metal?" the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire asked in excitement. Ling Han nodded and replied, "Yes, divine metal." He had to admit that Wally was truly an honest person. Unbelievably honest, in fact. He had been the first to discover this divine metal, yet he actually hadn't taken it away in secret. After jumping around in excitement for a while, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire shook his head and said, "Forget about it. It's better if you give me a few ascending origin tier precious tools. Otherwise, I'm not powerful enough to possess such a treasure either. If I reveal it, I'll definitely be robbed." This was the brutal truth. If one weren't powerful enough, yet they possessed an incredible treasure, they would essentially be inviting others to rob them. Moreover, to the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, obtaining pseudo-celestial tools at the Immortal Palace tier was naturally better at this moment. After all, he could unleash their full might. Ling Han was slightly confused at this moment. He had initially thought that the original owner of this place was a 5-star alchemist. Now, however, it appeared like they were extremely skilled at tool refinement as well. Such a prodigy was extremely rare. There had been a celestial tool here, the one that had been taken by the ancestor of the Kong clan. It was now in Ling Han's hands. At the same time, there had also been 3 5-star alchemical pills. It was unlikely that the ancestor of the Kong clan had obtained any. After collecting all the treasures, they arrived before the 7th and final building. The 7 stars gathered, and this building was the central star. "You can't remove this restriction?" Ling Han asked Wally. "No," Wally replied with a shake of his head. "If one's power doesn't exceed the strength of the restriction, then there's no way to remove it. However, if one's power exceeds it, the absolute restriction will obliterate everything in the building." Ling Han was extremely curious at this moment. Of the 7 buildings, 3 housed alchemical pills, while 3 housed precious tools. Among them, there were Celestial King tier alchemical pills and also Celestial King tier tools. That being the case, what did this carefully protected building hold? They walked in a circle around the building. However, even Wally couldn't remove the restriction here, so they naturally couldn't do anything either. After circling the building a few more times, they could only sigh in resignation. However, it was at this moment that Ching walked over. She extended her small arm and stroked the wall of the building. This young girl couldn't cause any damage to the building, and the restriction of the building only targeted the building itself anyway. Thus, her stroking the wall wouldn't lead to any danger, and Ling Han and the others let her be. "Even though there's still 1 building left, we've already collected quite the astonishing amount of treasures," Ling Han said with a nod. He had obtained several 10th refinement alchemical pills, which would greatly aid him in his endeavor to become a 5-star alchemist. Everyone nodded in agreement. They couldn't remove the restriction, so what else could they do? "Let's go." They turned around and prepared to leave. However, after taking just a few steps, they suddenly heard a cracking sound traveling over from behind them. They turned around, only to see a web of cracks on the exterior of the 7th building. These cracks weren't on the building itself, but rather on its exterior. It was as if the air had solidified, and was now cracking. With a pop, the air crumbled apart like shattering crystals. "The restriction is broken?" everyone exclaimed in astonishment. Just then, they had still claimed that this restriction couldn't be broken. Otherwise, if it were, it would destroy everything in the building. Now, however, the restriction had been broken, and the building was still fine? They all looked toward Wally. However, Wally also wore a confused expression. His eyes flashed, and it was clear that he was performing furious calculations. He also couldn't understand this situation. The restriction had genuinely been broken. However, no other reaction followed. Could it be because of Qing Qing? Bewitching Maiden Ro asked. They all looked toward Qing Qing. However, they immediately shook their heads. No matter how they looked at her, this young girl didn't appear to possess any unique ability. "Since the restriction has been removed, let's go in and take a look," Ling Han said. He retrieved his divine demon sword as he walked over. He couldn't use the Black Tower, one of his biggest defensive trump cards, now. Thus, he naturally couldn't be careless facing the unknown. "Be careful," the Empress warned in concern. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement. He then grabbed Wally over, and held him in front like a shield. Even celestial kings couldn't kill Wally, so he was naturally fit to be used as a shield. Everyone was rendered speechless. Chapter 2393 Arrival of Elites. Chapter 2393 Arrival of Elites. Ling Han's words were courageous and moving, yet he was now using the pitiful Wally as a shield. This was utterly shameless. Meanwhile, Wally was filled with confusion. "Why are you grabbing me?" "I'm scared that you'll trip," Ling Han randomly replied. Wally became even more confused, and he said, "I have a strong balancing ability, so I won't trip even if I lose my center of gravity. There's no need for you to grab me. Don't worry, just treat this as me respecting elders and caring for youth," Ling Han said, continuing to make up nonsense. Others could see through his nonsense in an instant. However, Wally could only react after performing the necessary calculations. Right now, he had determined that the 7th building posed almost no danger to them at all. Thus, he was naturally confused about Ling Han's intentions. In terms of analysis alone, Wally was definitely one of a kind. Perhaps even Heavenly Venerates couldn't rival him. In terms of simple emotional intelligence, however, he was on the same level as toddlers. Wally wore an expression of confusion. However, he still nodded and accepted the excuse of respecting elders and caring for youth. This was because he was indeed very old. Ling Han entered the building with Wally. Qing Qing also wanted to enter, yet she was dragged back by bewitching Maiden Ro, who shook her head and said, "It's dangerous." Qing Qing also wore an expression of confusion as she looked up at bewitching Maiden Ro. Her expression could certainly compete with Wally's. Ling Han advanced very slowly, with his divine demon sword in his right hand and his shield, Wally in his left hand. He was extremely careful as he took each step. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead, so he naturally had to be as careful as he could. Like the maw of a gigantic beast, the inside of the building was pitch black. However, when Ling Han arrived in the depths of the building, the surroundings suddenly became bright and illuminated. The pitch-black building instantly became radiant. He squinted his eyes as he observed the surroundings. This building was completely different from what he had imagined. There were no shelves here, and there was instead a gigantic mirror in the middle of the room. Was this some kind of paramount treasure? One that needed the protection of a self-destructive restriction? Its owner had forged it, yet restricted it to this building. It was as if they were hesitant to destroy it, yet also hesitant to have others obtain it. This made Ling Han extremely curious about this mirror. He casually tossed Wally aside as he looked toward the mirror, only to see his own reflection appearing in the mirror. Looking closely, his figure disappeared, and what replaced it was an expanse of starry sky. Looking again, and the starry sky also disappeared. What replaced it was something that even Ling Han couldn't comprehend. "This is dimension coordinates!" Wally suddenly exclaimed. His voice was filled with emotion. "What's dimension coordinates?" Ling Han asked. Wally pondered for a moment before replying. "For example, if we want to enter another dimension, we can only travel through the connection between the two dimensions. However, each dimension will definitely have its own weak points. If these weak points are discovered by elites, they can use their profound power to directly enter through these points. So we can use this item to enter other dimensions?" Ling Han asked. Wally shook his head and said, "The person who created this machine possesses astonishing knowledge of the regulations of space. He found the weak point of your dimension off course. This might also be an incorrect discovery. In any case, only elites from other dimensions can arrive through here." Ling Han couldn't help but feel disappointed. Only others could arrive through here, and they couldn't use it to leave. This was truly a useless item. No wonder the owner of this place had put a strict restriction on the mirror. If it were activated, they would be inviting enemies into their house. "This item is a threat." Ling Han pondered for a moment before continuing. "We have to destroy it." The original owner most likely hadn't been willing to destroy it. After all, it was the culmination of their hard work. Moreover, this mirror was indeed an advanced tool. However, the original owner had clearly realized its threat as well. Thus, they had put a strict restriction on it in order to avoid any dangers. Wally didn't say anything. However, green light beamed from his eyes, and continually scanned the mirror. Ling Han brandished his divine demon sword, leaping forward and slashing down at the mirror. Right at this moment, however, something peculiar happened. The mirror suddenly lit up before starting to spin, becoming quicker and quicker. "Wally!" Ling Han shouted. "This person didn't activate the mirror, did he?" Wally didn't reply, and he continued to scan the mirror. With a roar, Ling Han raised his divine demon sword again. Swoosh! A burst of sword light swept forward, launching toward the mirror like a gigantic dragon. 1. A terrifying aura emanated into the surroundings, and it was as if the heavens were about to collapse. The sword chi shattered with a crack before it could even strike the mirror, dissipating like a firework. Gasp! Ling Han involuntarily drew a sharp breath. This mirror was a precious tool, as Wally called it, a machine. It could mark the location of the celestial realm for countless other realms. It was like a lighthouse. Through the guidance of this lighthouse, paramount beings from other dimensions could traverse across dimensions to arrive here. This was a weak spot that could be penetrated. Just then, Ling Han hadn't been worried. Firstly, the mirror hadn't been activated. Secondly, even if it were activated, there was most likely not an elite who was so bored that they would continue to observe the Genesis world. As such, they wouldn't realize that a lighthouse had suddenly appeared. In any case, it was unconfirmed whether this was a true weak point. At this moment, Ling Han truly wanted to curse. It appeared as if all three conditions had been satisfied. This kind of petrifying aura definitely belonged to the heavenly venerates such as Heavenly Venerate Wula. Who was this? Who was coming over? If this were a heavenly venerate from a foreign dimension, just what kind of destructive damage would they cause? With a bellow, he started to swing his divine demon sword. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Bursts of sword chi dashed forward, dancing in the air like dragons. However, the aura emanating from the mirror was still increasing in power. The sword chi from the divine demon sword was completely unable to inhibit it. Ling Han wanted to directly hack the mirror with his sword, yet he didn't even possess the ability to approach it. This aura was so profound that even the heavens would have to prostrate. Boom! Dark clouds formed overhead, signaling the formation of heavenly tribulation. This was a reaction from the heaven and earth of the celestial realm. A paramount being was trying to enter this realm, so even heaven and earth were treating them as an enemy. The existence of heavenly venerates was transcendent above the regulations, so they were innately ruining the equilibrium already. The women and the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire also entered the building. They were stunned by what they saw. Moreover, the paramount aura that suffused the surroundings made them go weak at the knees, forcing them to collapse to the floor. Only one person was unaffected: Qing. This was far too astonishing. This was the furious aura of a heavenly venerate, yet a young girl was actually able to face it with no fear? If one wanted to withstand the aura of a heavenly venerate, they had to be at least at the 8th heaven or 9th heaven of the celestial king tier. Could this young girl possibly be such an elite? Qing's expression remained one of confusion. However, when she looked at the mirror, her eyes gradually became clear. A paramount aura started to seep from her body. Right at this moment, the mirror suddenly shuddered, with its surface undulating like waves. A figure appeared, and it was as if they had walked over from a profound depth. The mirror shuddered violently, and a head pushed at its surface, forcing it to stretch 30 centimeters out. It was as if they were about to break out from the mirror. However, the mirror possessed powerful elasticity, rendering the person's attempts futile. However, the person started to push with their hands as well, and with a slight burst of power. Pa! The surface of the mirror shattered all across the floor. A figure appeared where the mirror had been. Gasp! A person had genuinely traversed through the dimensions and arrived at the celestial realm? Ling Han and the others gazed over. This was a handsome person who looked to be around 20 years old. However, this wasn't important. His aura was far too profound, causing the thunderclouds above them to become increasingly dense. It was as if they were about to unleash the energy of the entire heaven and earth. Chapter 2394 I'm Zhou Heng. Chapter 2394 I'm Zhou Heng. Aya! The young man looked up with an apologetic smile. His petrifying aura also receded like a tide. In an instant, it was as if he had transformed into an ordinary person. The tribulation of heaven and earth also lost its target, leading it to rapidly dissipate. Ling Han was astounded by what he saw. This young man was definitely a heavenly venerate. However, he could actually conceal his aura and trick the heavens? This was far too astonishing. Wally's eyes became green as he looked the young man up and down. He was acting as recklessly as one could. However, this young man seemed to have a good temper, and he swept his gaze over them before smiling, and saying, "Hi, I'm Zhou Heng, and I come from another dimension." This kind of arrival and introduction. Ling Han and the others were rendered speechless. A heavenly venerate was actually this amiable? He wasn't stating his title and sect? Meanwhile, Wally frowned, and said, "Something on his body is blocking my scanning. A war soldier from the technology realm?" Zhou Heng took a few glances at Wally before nodding, and saying, "Quite hard to come by. There's no guarantee that one can be created every few hundred epochs." Ling Han and the others were even more astounded. This heavenly venerate was seemingly familiar with many different dimensions. One had to realize that the Genesis world was a cruel dog-eat-dog world, where the different dimensions were always at war and trying to engulf each other. With the arrival of a foreign heavenly venerate, just what kind of devastating calamity would follow? "Fellow friend, are you cultivating your mind in the mortal world?" Zhou Heng asked as he looked at Qing. He wore an expression of praise, and he continued, "It's extremely difficult to take the second step in super low-level dimensions. However, you're able to find a different method. Your talent is truly worthy of my praise." Ling Han and the others felt as if they were dreaming. Just how freakish were heavenly venerates? Their status was paramount, and they would often refer to themselves as this venerate. However, Zhou Heng was simply referring to himself as I or my one. This was truly inconceivable. However, Zhou Heng was actually referring to Qing as a fellow friend? Fellow friend. Gasp! Ling Han and the others all drew a sharp breath. Perhaps Qing was also a heavenly venerate? There were only 4 heavenly venerates in the entire celestial realm: Wu Le, Jiu, Sealed Emotions, and Green Flames. Qing. Green Flames won? Qing was also looking at Zhou Heng. Her gaze was still puzzled, yet it was gradually regaining clarity. Bah! Zhou Heng suddenly unleashed a short shout, and it was as if the drums of evening and the bells of dawn were awakening one's soul. 1. Ling Han and the others felt their minds sink before awakening again. It was as if something extra had appeared in their bodies. They couldn't describe what this was, yet it was seemingly allowing them to attain new comprehension of the great Tao of heaven and earth. Was the Heavenly Venerate bestowing this upon them? Qing Qing's gaze instantly became clear. Boom! A paramount aura instantly exploded from her body. At this moment, it was as if all mortals could only kneel and prostrate before her. Heavenly Venerate. This was definitely the aura of a Heavenly Venerate. Qing Qing. No. The green flame's Heavenly Venerate unleashed her paramount aura at this moment, and she frowned as she gazed at Zhou. She couldn't see through this powerful being. However, would a mighty Heavenly Venerate be afraid of others? Boom! Green flames erupted above her. These were flames that would cause even ninth heaven celestial kings to tremble. Ling Han and the others bared their teeth. They had actually journeyed together with a Heavenly Venerate for so many days? And they had even protected her as if she were a helpless young girl? In fact, Ling Han had even wanted to take her as his disciple? According to Zhou, the green flame's Heavenly Venerate had been cultivating her mind in the mortal world. Thus, by the looks of it, she had purposefully suppressed her cultivation and transformed into an ordinary human in the toilsome mortal world. Through struggles and hardships, she desired to temper her mind, and thus take that second step. Each person was a part of heaven and earth. Each person possessed the power of heaven and earth. However, it was just that ordinary mortals were unable to harness and wield this power. Each person was a treasure trove. Who are you? From where do you come? The green flame's Heavenly Venerate asked. However, she was still in the form of a young girl of 7 or 8 years old, so her voice sounded extremely childish. The contrast was extremely stark. Heaven and earth didn't tolerate Heavenly Venerates, so flashes of lightning lashed down at the green flame's Heavenly Venerate. However, this was naturally useless against Heavenly Venerates. They didn't even need to dodge it. Zhou smiled faintly and said, I harbor no animosity. My reason for coming here is simple. I want to invite elites such as yourself and other young prodigies to a transcendent dimension. Go to a transcendent dimension. Dare I ask, Lord, what's a transcendent dimension? Is it even more powerful than a high-level dimension? Ling Han asked with courage. He felt like this Heavenly Venerate was an extremely amiable person. In fact, this Heavenly Venerate's personality was quite similar to his. He would be extremely friendly and easy to approach as long as his bottom line wasn't crossed. If this bottom line were crossed, however, he would be even more ruthless than others when he unleashed his fury. Zhou nodded and replied, There are a total of 4 transcendent dimensions. Now, however, only a single one remains. He wore a solemn expression as he spoke. Everyone was astonished. The fundamental goal of the realm wars was to engulf other dimensions. Theoretically speaking, if this remaining transcendent dimension had managed to engulf the 3 other transcendent dimensions, it should have become invincible. As such, what was there to worry about? Zhou smiled and said, Fine, let me explain this from the beginning. It will clear up your confusion. This Heavenly Venerate was indeed a good-tempered person. The entire Genesis world is like a snake. The dimensions exist in a linear fashion, from the strongest down to the weakest. Moreover, the oldest dimensions will slowly decay toward death. At the same time, new dimensions are also being born. This is an endless cycle of death and birth. Zhou pondered for a moment before continuing. Instead of viewing it as a snake, it's better to view it as a taiji one. It's a cycle of life and death. A long time ago, each dimension in the Genesis world was completely independent. There existed no connections between them, and neither one would interfere with another. As such, there was naturally no realm war. However, at some point in time, the people in an aging dimension were unresigned to their dimension decaying and crumbling, transforming into void. Thus, they created a powerful type of Bainab being called hysteria. Hysteria exists to engulf others. It exists to extract energy from other dimensions to replenish an aging dimension. Relying on hysteria, this aging dimension managed to hold on for several hundred more epochs. However, after absorbing so much power of heaven and earth, hysteria became more and more powerful. In fact, it became so powerful that even the people in that aging dimension couldn't control it anymore. And thus, that aging dimension also became a sacrifice to hysteria. It was engulfed by its own creation. Hysteria started to engulf dimensions with no bounds, continually strengthening itself. In the end, it also transformed into a dimension itself, the most powerful dimension. According to the rules of the Genesis world, it's located at the very front. It continued to engulf dimensions. However, behind it were 4 powerful transcendent dimensions that contained countless elites, greatly slowing it down. However, after countless epochs, 3 of the transcendent dimensions have already been engulfed by hysteria. The supreme elites from these dimensions have all retreated to the final remaining transcendent dimension. Together with the elites from this dimension, they're now resisting the invasion of hysteria. Even so, we're still on the back foot. If this continues, there'll eventually come a day when the final transcendent dimension also falls. At that time, the entire Genesis world will be engulfed by hysteria, forever descending into darkness and primal chaos. As things stand now, the Genesis world has also been forced to launch a defensive mechanism, activating the Realm Wars. This is an attempt to create more transcendent dimensions. Everyone was transfixed with shock. This was the truth behind the Realm Wars. The aim of the Realm Wars was actually this lofty and supreme? It was in order to fight back against the destruction of the entire Genesis world. Ling Han was still confused, and he asked, "Why do we need to create more transcendent dimensions?" Zhou Heng smiled, and replied, "Because the higher one's cultivation, the more they require a higher level dimension to unleash their full power. Take me, for example. If I release my full cultivation, the response from heaven and earth will be immense. If it isn't heaven and earth that suppresses me, it will be me who destroys heaven and earth." Chapter 2395 6th Tier Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2395 6th Tier Heavenly Venerate. Heaven and earth couldn't tolerate heavenly venerates. After so long, why could the foreign realm still not defeat the celestial realm? This was because the heaven and earth of the celestial realm was the most powerful weapon. Otherwise, the elites from the foreign realm would have charged over long ago. Thus, once the final transcendent dimension was engulfed by hysteria, the supreme elites from that dimension would have no other place to settle. At that time, how could they fight against hysteria? Right now, even the Genesis world had been forced to link the dimensions together. It had activated the Realm Wars, and was attempting to create more transcendent dimensions. It was abundantly clear just how terrifying hysteria was. The green flame's Heavenly Venerate remained silent. The aim of her, the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable, and the Jiu Heavenly Venerate was simply to become transcendent beings, beings who were free from the restrictions of this heaven and earth. They wanted the freedom to travel through the dimensions without any restrictions. However, after listening to Zhou Heng, were they genuinely transcendent? Once hysteria charged over, all of the dimensions would be destroyed. The transcendence of heavenly venerates simply allowed them to break free from the restrictions of their dimension. They could reside in any dimension without worrying about their strength being weakened. However, if the dimensions all disappeared, heavenly venerates would also be rendered useless. That being the case, what transcendence would they enjoy? Ling Han's expression was solemn. He hadn't imagined that the situation was so grave. In comparison, the invasion by the foreign realm truly seemed insignificant. "Lord, so you've come over to nurture more elites to fight against hysteria?" Ling Han asked. Zhou Heng nodded and said, "Right now, we've stopped hysteria outside the final transcendent dimension. However, our casualty numbers are too great, so we need more fresh reinforcements. As such, I'm traveling through the dimensions in search of prodigies to bring back to the transcendent dimension to nurture." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I won't force anyone, but I still hope that those who are prodigious will follow me to the front lines. Otherwise, once the transcendent dimension falls to hysteria, everything will transform into void. Boom! Right at this moment, a colossal tentacle suddenly materialized in the air, slamming down at the green flames Heavenly Venerate and the others. This tentacle was pitch black, and it was covered in numerous indescribable symbols. Its appearance instantly triggered wails of grief from heaven and earth. A corner of heaven and earth was forcefully torn apart, leading to an endless deluge of bloody rain. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse. Damn it! Heng's expression changed drastically. He reached out with his right hand, and a sword had already appeared in his hand at some time. With a single slash, heaven and earth were shaken. The green flames Heavenly Venerate also gave a shout as she pushed her palms out, summoning a wave of boundless flames. Pun! The tentacle slammed down, and the green flames Heavenly Venerate was ruthlessly sent flying. Meanwhile, Heng barely managed to dash over in time, swinging his sword and slashing at the tentacle. Pooh! The sword hacked into the tentacle, yet no blood sprayed into the air. Instead, the tentacle shuddered lightly before transforming into bubbles and vanishing without a trace. This is a spiritual mark of hysteria. It most likely discovered the dimension coordinates of this place as well, so it followed me here. Fortunately, this dimension beacon has already been destroyed. Hysteria can't come here again. Heng sheathed his sword as he spoke. He then looked toward the green flames Heavenly Venerate. The green flames Heavenly Venerate was in an extremely miserable state. After facing an attack head-on, her chest had directly caved in. She picked herself up with great difficulty. Boom! Flames enveloped her, and her wounds started to slowly heal. A cold chill gripped the hearts of Linghan and the others. The green flames Heavenly Venerate had actually been severely wounded in a single strike. One had to realize that the tentacle had only been a spiritual mark of hysteria. Just how great was the gulf between their respective power? Linghan then looked at Heng. This person was most likely even more powerful than Heavenly Venerate Wulu. Otherwise, he couldn't have exterminated hysteria's spiritual mark. Heng smiled at Linghan and said, "The Heavenly Venerable Tier is divided into 7 minor tiers. I'm a 6th tier Heavenly Venerate." Fuck! Linghan and the others were rendered speechless. No wonder this person was so powerful. He was actually a 6th tier Heavenly Venerate. One had to realize that Heavenly Venerate Wula was only at the peak stage of the 1st tier, yet he could already rival the team of Zhou Heavenly Venerate and the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. That being the case, just how powerful was a 6th tier Heavenly Venerate? Then what about hysteria? Linghan asked in curiosity. Hysteria reached the peak stage of the 7th tier long ago. Now it's transformed into a dimension itself, so it's already pointless to measure its power in terms of the Heavenly Venerable Tier. Heng pondered for a moment before replying. In other words, it was even more powerful than 7th tier Heavenly Venerates. This was quite understandable. Otherwise, it couldn't have destroyed 3 transcendent dimensions. The green flames Heavenly Venerate's wounds still had yet to fully recover. However, she turned around and said, "I've decided. I'm going to follow you to the transcendent dimension." In this dimension, she had almost reached the peak of her potential already. It was almost impossible to take another step forward. Of course, this was unless the celestial realm crumbled, and she absorbed the essence power of heaven and earth. Only so could she possibly advance to the 2nd tier and realize transcendence. However, this was only a possibility. Moreover, hysteria was so petrifying, so it was hard to say whether she could ever see this day. Finally, the transcendent dimension could nurture 7th tier Heavenly Venerates, so she would naturally have a better environment to develop if she went there. Heng nodded in delight, saying, "I can sense 3 other Heavenly Venerates in this dimension. These are all potential allies to recruit. Also, young people like this are our hope for the future. I can only come once, so I need to take everyone who wants to go together." The transcendent dimension definitely had something like a dimension beacon that could guide him back. "Let's go together." Heng reached forward and drew Linghan and the others into his sleeve. Of course, he didn't draw the green flames Heavenly Venerate into his sleeve. Even though she was weaker than him, she was still a Heavenly Venerate, after all. Those who could reach this cultivation were all paramount prodigies. With a slash of his sword, Zhou sliced apart the void. He immediately stepped in. After hesitating for a brief moment, the green flames Heavenly Venerate also stepped in after him. Heavenly Venerates were far too powerful. A split second after stepping into the void, Zhou had already stepped out. They arrived before a tall mountain. There was a palace atop this mountain, and with their powerful vision, they could all clearly see the words, Sealed Emotion Palace. It exuded an aura of undying eternity. Zhou shook his sleeve, and everyone landed on the ground. He shook his sleeves again, and his aura as a Heavenly Venerate also vanished. This was to avoid being targeted by heaven and earth. As a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate, if he unleashed his full power, the only fate of the celestial realm would be destruction. The green flames Heavenly Venerate also arrived. Upon seeing Zhou suppress his aura, she was also too embarrassed to show off her own cultivation. After all, even a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate was being so modest. She suppressed her aura, yet she was nowhere near as able as Zhou. She could only maintain this suppression for a short amount of time before being targeted by heaven and earth again. They headed toward the mountain peak. Someone leaped over and roared, "Impudence!" This person blocked their path. This was a youth at the ascending origin tier. He clearly didn't recognize the green flames Heavenly Venerate, and he more so couldn't recognize Zhou. However, he was extremely familiar with Ling Han. He immediately yelped, "Ling Han!" He was extremely astonished. A measly ascending origin tier elite actually dared to barge into the residence of a Heavenly Venerate? Had he eaten the courage of a dragon? However, Ling Han had someone backing him, so he was naturally brimming with confidence. "I'm accompanying 2 seniors over, so please help me request a meeting with the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable." The young man exploded with rage. Ling Han actually dared to speak so wantonly? This was a Heavenly Venerate. Was this someone who could be called over on a whim? Also, what did he mean? Accompanying 2 seniors? He didn't recognize either of them. At the most, they were only at the Celestial King tier. Yet, they wanted an audience with the Heavenly Venerate? Were they dreaming? "Very well! You actually dare to barge into the Sealed Emotion Palace. Don't even think about leaving in one piece," he said in a menacing voice. Ling Han chuckled in his mind. He had naturally laid a trap for this person. Otherwise, he could have directly announced the Green Flame's Heavenly Venerate's title. Zhou glanced at him, and a faint smile surprisingly tugged at his lips. He showed no signs of wanting to chide Ling Han. Ling Han knew that this person had most likely been playful in his youth as well. Thus, he allowed him to cause a ruckus here. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.